going to have another Thursday evening budget work session. And we have a number of items on this evening's agenda, ending with identification of reconciliation items. We'll be checking in to make sure that we get all of those, and then those reconciliation item end of agenda pieces will turn into discussion of reconciliation items and budget reconciliation. So be sure to get your items in. Make sure that you're thinking during the meeting about anything that you need to put on the list at the end of the meeting. And we'll start with the Safe Speed program, and the chief is here.
Safe.
Assuming technology works.
Is this also known
Thank
as
you.
speed camera?
Yes.
We've got, you should have in front of you the package of presentations for this evening. We're going to start out with Speed Camera Fund, which I'll just go through. We've got the chief up here, as well as Captain Bowers, to answer any additional questions. After the Speed Camera Fund, we'll go to Recreation, I believe, and then Housing and Community Development, and then we'll end with General Government and Non-Departmental. So you should have all 5 of those presentations there. Hopefully you enjoy the pictures. People went through lots of angst to pick out those pictures, and so hopefully we have some good pictures for everybody.
And they'll show up on the screen here in a few minutes.
Okay.
Got to flip a couple switches.
So while they're working on that, I will just, if everybody has it in, I'll just sort of quickly go through the Speed Camera Fund. We've got forecasted, obviously, revenue and expenditures. Our revenue is roughly equal to what it was in fiscal year 14. Expenditures are down a little bit from fiscal year 14, mostly due to some reductions in capital improvement projects. Specifically in fiscal year 14, there's a large radio purchase and some design costs for the Ethan Allen Gateway project. Those costs are not in the fiscal year 15 budget, so that's about almost a $300,000 reduction, which, as you can see, is the majority of the decrease in expenditures for the Speed Camera Fund. As you remember, there are 3 FTEs that are located in the that are funded by revenues that come from the Speed Camera Fund: police sergeant, a police officer, and the photo enforcement analyst. We've got also on the 3rd page of the slide, we've got roughly about $700,000 or so in the Speed Camera Fund balance. Again, those all funds that come into the Speed Camera Fund balance are eligible for public safety related expenditures. We've got a bit of a balance, and we sort of in that balance provides some contingency for the potential for decreased revenues, because we've got FTEs that are located that are funded from that fund, as well as we've got some additional capital outlays in fiscal years 16, 17, 18, and 19, I believe, that we're also funding from the Speed Camera Fund balance. Again, just to remind everyone that revenues that come from the Speed Camera program is really the second. It's sort of the additional point. The primary point is public safety, and we've seen a 95% reduction in traffic accidents in these safe speed corridors since the inception of the program. So the money is sort of a secondary issue. We feel like it's been incredibly successful from the public safety perspective in seeing a dramatic decrease in traffic accidents. With that, any questions?
When you say 95% reduction in the safe speed corridor, there's the corridors, there's more than one. I know one is New Hampshire Avenue. And I know, but I mean, when you speak of corridors, is that in the sense that where the state will change the law to allow for safe speed zones?
No, it's all the safe speed locations, including the corridors.
Okay, all of them together. So, okay. Wow, that's impressive.
Can we use any of the safe speed money for the Flower Avenue project? Is that permissible?
I don't have a great answer on that. I guess it depends on the interpretation of
public safety
and what's eligible. I know we've we've, in the past, done some work on the Ethan Allen Gateway project, and I would have to look back to see exactly if that was more public safety related elements of it, but we can find out the answer to that question.
And if I could just add, I would use a little caution because the law has changed. It may not make a difference for us this next year, but, the per ticket fees are no longer going to be allowed. And again, I haven't had a chance to look at the new laws because they just, all 300 of them came out the other day. But it's going to be a tiered system, and we're not sure how that's going to play out for revenues over the next couple of years. Right now, I think we have 3 more years on the contract. We're grandfathered. As far as I know, that did not change in the law.
That did not change. We're grandfathered for the length of this
So
contract.
we have 3 more years, but we just something to think about in the future is that we have a different system that we're going to be under in 3 years, if there's even a speed camera program in 3 years.
Question. The expenses of that program is approximately estimated to be about $838,000 on revenues of $1.8 million. And when I compare that $838,000 to the contract we have with Montgomery County to do all of our rental unit inspections, which runs between $200,000 and $300,000, I'm struck by the enormity of what it costs to have outside company simply do some electronic processing.
Well, it's more than that. It's a lot more than that.
I'd like to understand what that is, if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the electronic processing. One, I don't know of any jurisdiction in the state that doesn't use a contractor to do the program. The cameras are $140,000 a piece. If it breaks, they fix it. If it gets hit, they replace it. There's maintenance that's required on the cameras. The batteries have to be replaced on the portable cameras every day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. They get replaced every single day. So there's a technician that the company supplies that comes out and does that. We don't do that. Then the back end, to process all those citations, you're talking about 5 to 10 staff. I mean, by the time you add it all up and then the price of the equipment, that's not to say that in 3 years we can't negotiate a better contract. But it would cost us as much, and then if speed cameras go away, we have 15 people on staff that we're going to have to fire. In the long run, it's probably cheaper.
So why 15?
I'm just looking at what the county has 25 people just doing their tickets, in their Safe Speed program. That's not including the volume of citations that the contractor's looking at. I'm saying that we need technicians. We need 3 or 4 technicians, 2 or 3 technicians at the minimum, to cover for when people are off. We would need to, be able to have a vendor come in and replace or fix those cameras, which is extremely expensive. Again, $140,000 a piece, and they do break. I mean, and like I said, they come out, they fix it, or they pull out the camera and put another one in it, and take the other one back and fix it, so it's not going down out of service for any particular amount of time. And then we have to go through the whole hiring process. We have to pay workers' comp. We have to pay all the fringe benefits and everything else. It would get quite expensive. Just on the cameras alone. We have one bad storm and takes out 2 cameras. There's $340,000, $380,000 right there.
So they, in effect, indemnify us from any losses, man-made or by nature.
Yeah, and they repair the equipment as needed and replace it as needed under the contract. And the other issue is that I don't know if the legislation passed. I'm sure if it didn't, it will be back next year regarding civil penalties for improper issuance of the citations, and that's on the companies, not us. There are additional issues if we issue it, but generally the citations that come to the police department, we have the final review before they're issued, but the vendor, if they're currently putting them out and they're not maintaining the devices and not doing the certifications as required, then it's on them.
Any other questions about this section, speed camera?
Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions. First, as a comment, to me, avoiding fringe and benefit costs is never a reason to outsource something. That's city policy, I believe. We're supposed to use employees, not contract services, for essential functions. But that's a tangent. I'd be really interested if we could get. Let me back up. When I looked back at one of the mid-year budget amendments, and I looked at the expenses to the revenue, the number had gone up in a way that sort of surprised me. The amount spent, what looked like amount spent for the contractor that opted for Xerox or Xerox's subsidiary, and so I know that 2 times prior the council has increased the compensation to what is it, Xerox or ACE? What's their ACS.
It's ACS, but it's Xerox.
Oh, it's Xerox.
Same-
Okay, so
same
let me just say
company.
Xerox. And so I just want to make sure that we're still paying them the amount that is consistent with city policy. But the more important point is I think it would be very helpful, not necessarily in the budget context, but to use MML or use COG or somebody to get some sort of evaluation of how much other jurisdictions are paying. So we have a sort of a baseline or a regional, some sort of sense of what's right within the region. Otherwise, as far as I can tell, we're just sort of going blind. We took probably what was the lowest bidder or the best service when we did a bid, but I don't know that council had a bunch of regional data to compare to.
Did we piggyback on another contract?
It's Montgomery County's, I'm assuming, because Montgomery County does a lot of the processing. And that's partly where we're at. We didn't do our own. I mean, I know there are other companies that other jurisdictions have gone to that are not quite as big. It may be a little cheaper on the contract, but they're also having problems with support. So,
I mean, I'm more
yeah,
not thinking about.
No, I
Yeah.
agree with you. We're locked for 3 years, but during that next 3 years or 2 years until we have to go back and look at another contract, I think it's reasonable that we look at what we're really paying and what we should be paying. And we'll also have a better idea of how the tiered system is going to work on those agencies that are not under contract right now or losing or ending their contracts and will be under the tiered system. So I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, it's not so much to get a different contractor, but to increase our leverage in negotiating
absolutely.
a good price, because it's a lot of money. In this, to go back to Councilmember Schultz's comments about the safe speed corridors, I noted, I think, in one of the narratives that in one of the locations the accidents has actually gone up, and it may have been, I think you reference it being related to some
Well,
other
I think
road changes.
we can thank SHA for and just anecdotally, in a conversation I had a little while ago,
That's what I wanted to suggest was just getting
No,
a 6-month update would be great. 6 months for the next
Yeah,
year.
just this last
knowing what
week,
was
we've
wrong.
had, but it's very hard to gauge because, one, we don't have an analyst right now. The other issue is the severity of the accidents. So, we don't measure that. We hopefully in another year, under acres, we'll be able to pull some of that data and analyze it. But we may not necessarily reduce the number of collisions. That's the goal. But we also want to reduce the severity of the injuries and the severity of the damage. So, if you have a fender bender, it's a lot better than having a fatal wreck or a serious personal injury. But anecdotally, I've heard more accidents going out in that corridor lately, and it's really because of the lane changes and the fact there's no light at the bottom of the hill.
Figures.
And there was a pedestrian fatality there, but it was Prince George's Police last week.
I think so. It was below East West Highway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask Brian a question? We have a fund here, but there's a display of expenses and income in the budget for the various years, but there's no balance. And I'd love to see an historical balance on the fund so that we can track, as we do with all of our funds, how it's going, how it's tracking over a period of years.
We can do that. And on the bullet on the slide, we forecast that we will have a fund balance in the speed camera fund of $714,000, but we can get the balance over the last few years.
It's a good idea on all of these, like this
Yeah.
special fund, is to be able to see that, like we do with the general fund.
Yep.
Anything else? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Next, I think we have recreation. And it looks like we have a full house for recreation.
Bring me a cup. Welcome to Greg Clark, some recreation employees, and the rec committee, which was having its meeting tonight and moved over here for this discussion, I assume. So, welcome to most of the house.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to start on the first page with our department summary. As you see, the Recreation Department's revenues are increasing. There's a 9% change in the positive for recreation revenue. Expenditures have slightly increased by about 1%. FTEs have increased by 0.13. The reason for this increase in FTEs is to staff the additional hours for senior programming at the the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center twice per week. Capital budget items for the Recreation Department. There are no capital budget items that we're proposing for FY15. With this new budget, the Recreation Department is proposing several new programs and initiatives. We are proposing $10,000 toward a pilot youth summer jobs program that will kick off this summer. That summer jobs program is in partnership with local businesses and agencies, nonprofits here within the city of Tacoma Park. We look to employ anywhere between 5 and 7 young people this summer in this pilot program, and we've set aside $10,000 to do that. Other new initiatives that we are proposing, as I mentioned earlier, expansion of the seniors program at the New Hampshire Avenue. Yes.
The $10,000, does that go to subsidize the cost to the employers? Is it administrative costs for summer jobs?
The $10,000 goes towards the subsidy for the young people. We're actually proposing to pay the young people. The city will fund a minimum wage payment for the young people that participate in this program.
Thanks.
How long will the program run?
The program will run 6 weeks. The number of hours per week per employee is anywhere between 20 and 25 hours per week. Although the city is providing wages for the young people, if a business that is participating would like to provide wages for the employee, they're welcome to do so and participate as well. Mm-hmm. We're actually encouraging that.
And we asking them that first before we say, and if you don't, we'll pay it? Because if we don't do it that way, they're not going to offer.
If I can, I think the idea is we want to try to develop some infrastructure. We don't really have any infrastructure today as it relates to having a formalized program, and we may not in the future, and so we wanted to make sure that we at least had some surety around being able to get a certain number of kids jobs for the summer, and we're open if other employers, especially if they're watching, wanted to provide funds, but we wanted to have a minimum number of kids that we knew were going to be able to be employed for the summer.
And do you have criteria yet for the businesses or nonprofits that can apply for this?
Yes, we've began to reach out to businesses and nonprofits within the city to participate. Just because it's a pilot program and we only have a limited number of opportunities for young people, we actually chose several partners to reach out to see if they were interested, and most of the partners that we reached out to within the city were interested. So it may become a situation where we have more employers that are interested in participating than we can actually take into the program. So
Can you tell
because
us-
it's a pilot, we really try to target and make sure that we got the kids meaningful opportunities as a part of this program.
Can you tell us who some of the partners are right now, or do you want to wait?
Yes. Some of the partners include, I know we partner with the, which all aren't confirmed as of yet. We've sent out the agreement, and we were actually waiting on the agreement to come back.
So
if
don't tell us
possible, I would
don't
like
tell
to
us
wait.
if you don't have an agreement back.
Yeah.
Don't tell us.
I would like to wait.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. All right.
The department is providing some kind of orientation or guidance to the participants so that they are prepared for actually, you want to just very briefly elaborate on that?
Yes. As part of the program, we're planning to have various workshops for the young people. The initial workshop will include interviewing techniques, resume writing techniques, and how to dress, things of that nature. And then those that are chosen, actually chosen for the program, will actually take on a 3-day, a little bit more intensive process where we have a series of workshops scheduled for them to include financial literacy, workplace diversity, conduct in the workplace, things of that nature. So it's a little bit more intense for the young people that are actually chosen. But prior to being chosen, all of the participants that actually register for the program, we're going to take them through a brief workshop as well on some basic skills.
And will
what's
it be,
the-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
Will there be any sort of orientation or workshops for the businesses who are going to have the interns?
Yes,
Or the
yes.
young people?
Yes,
Mhm.
we've actually scheduled an orientation for the businesses as well, so that we can make sure that they're all of the procedures and processes that need to be in place are in place, and to make sure that the kids are receiving meaningful experiences. We actually have a employer packet that we sent out for all employers to outline the jobs that they're offering for the young people, and as well as get their commitment and time commitment for the young people that participated too.
So once this program is over in 6 weeks, what would be a success? What would you say, wow, this really worked? Would it be the number of kids that actually go through the entire program? Is it that you want the kids to actually learn or experience?
I think in this initial phase, we're looking forward to work out the kinks. We want this to be a success before we actually take on a lot of kids. We want to make sure that we have processes and procedures down in place. We want to make sure that we have a manageable number of young people, because we're planning on going and checking up on the young people, having a mid-year check-in with the employers to make sure everything is going okay with the employers, then try and troubleshoot a few things throughout the program. To me, that will be a success, just to make sure that the program gets off the ground, that we have young people that want to participate, as well as businesses that would like to participate, and that we gain something from this and we get experiences so that we can build on the program for next year.
Have you talked to the folks at Don Bosco Cristo Rey High School in the city?
I'm not sure if we have at this moment, no.
And I'm thinking of them only because all of their high school students work, I think, half-time during the
Yes.
school year and earn the money to pay their tuition. So I'm sure that they've got a lot of experience with pairing up employers and kids, and a lot of experience at who maybe doesn't fit their program but might fit our program.
Right.
So I'd encourage talking with them as soon as you're able, and
Will do.
see what knowledge and opportunities might be there.
Will do. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, 0.13 FTEs at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center for additional active adult programming, which translate to about $3,500. In addition, last year in the previous fiscal year, we provided provided opportunities for young people to take advantage of vocational training. We're still proposing to have $10,000 available for vocational training for those young people as well. Things that are on the horizon, we are in partnership with CHEER and the Tacoma Foundation. We're planning to have a youth visioning workshop, which will be a part of a larger youth summit and a larger youth effort that's taking place here in the city. In addition, we're planning to have active adult roundtable discussions. We're planning to have two, one at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center and the other one here in the community center. And at these roundtables, we're looking to get feedback from the community on our active adult programming. We really would like to see what types of active adult programming that the community would like to see and what direction that we need to go in to support those that are 55 plus.
Now, Greg, you mentioned earlier, I think it was last month when you came to talk to us about some of the things that were going to come up in the budget meeting, that you didn't have enough space for senior programming. Is that still the case?
No. The majority of our senior programming that takes place here at the community center is full.
Okay. So you could, if you had more space, you could program?
Yes.
Okay. I would just suggest you talk to Washington Adventist University. They have an activity center. Soon they're going to be, all the kids be going home. And I've talked to the CFO. They're willing to rent it out to us. But I'll give you their contact information.
Okay. All right. And, through the activities and support of city programs, the Recreation Department advances the council interest in economic development, environmental sustainability, and enhance the quality of life in Tacoma Park through our programs and services. We're enhancing the quality of life by supporting festivals and community groups and organizations to include Celebrate Tacoma, the Independence Day Parade, Play Day Committee, the Recreation Committee, CHEER, and others. We also are, with this budget, providing skill-building opportunities and vocational opportunities for young people and teens. We also would like to adding to the quality of life by increasing active adult participation for those 55 plus. You can leave it there. Actually, leave it there. Yeah. Additional items that the department has on the horizon that are not included on this slide is that we're placing a renewed focus and interest on learning opportunities around the multimedia arena. Previously, we've used our Mac Lab to have classes in Final Cut Pro and different levels of Final Cut Pro, which is a movie making and editing software, and also beginning GarageBand, which is a music production software. But since this coming fiscal year, we're actually going to expand our offerings and offer more developmental opportunities in that arena to include opportunities around the Adobe Suite, which we have licenses for now in that facility. So this fall we'll be expanding upon those opportunities and getting residents involved in multimedia opportunities. In addition, we're planning to modify the beginning phase of modifying the Kid City program at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center and modifying it to mirror the afternoon edition program here at this facility. The Kid City program there, which is the after-school program, currently operates Monday through Friday, and we're planning to add the additional day so that the residents that participate in that program receive the same services and benefits. It's actually, the program here in the community center is Monday through Friday. Yeah, and theirs is Monday through Thursday. So we want to make sure that those residents receive the same benefits and after-school care as the residents here that take place here in this facility. And again, we're going to continue to provide additional skill building opportunities for teens, and we would like to expand on our skill building camps for our teens. Right now, we currently offer a skill building spring break camp for our teen population, and we want to expand on that and possibly add go into the summer with those opportunities. For our highlights, wanted to talk a little bit about where our people are coming from that participate in our programs.
Amazing.
This slide represents the ward participation from unique households from 2009 when our electronic software was purchased to present. It shows a comparison between the first 2 years, which is 2009 through 2011, and 2012 and 2014.
And when did you start? When did you take over the department?
I became the director in January. It's 2 years, just about 2 years ago.
Right when the increase happened.
So we need to thank you.
While the number of households that we are reaching has increased, if you notice by this slide, the actual percentage of household pretty much remains the same. And when we're speaking of unique households, we're speaking of unique addresses. So it could be 4 or 5 people living in a household. These are the actual addresses. So not the actual number of people that are in the household. What ages of participants are we reaching through recreation programming? Comparing the same age date ranges, which is 2009 through 2011 to 2012 to 2014, most age ranges relatively stay consistent, with the exception of the 13 to 20-year-old age range, where we experienced a 7% increase in participation. I think that we can attribute this increase to a renewed focus on teen programs. Prior to, we didn't have a way to really capture the number of young people that we were really reaching in that age range prior to us getting the ActiveNet software. So the more programs and things that we put in, the better our programs got, the more focus that we put on those programs, the more young people actually started to participate in those programs and services, and we were able to capture them through their registrations and things of that nature. So I believe that's why we experienced a 7% increase in that area. And with that, that actually concludes my presentation.
I know Councilmember Siemens has a question.
Not really a question. I first of all would like to thank you for the presentation and thank you so much for the growth that we've seen in the Recreation Department. I am thrilled to see that you recognize that recreation is more than just sports. There are many other needs in the community, and I especially appreciate your focus on the young people and their employability, future employability, both through education and experience. I really thank you with that. As I look at the budget, if I were to identify a weakness, I would say it's in the arts programs, an area which we probably have, greater opportunity for the future. But I also wanted to take this opportunity because what I wanted to add to the reconciliation budget dovetails so well with the programs that you're now offering in the Recreation Department. I wanted to introduce this for the reconciliation budget. And this is to further address the educational needs of some of our I've been told not to use the term at-risk young people, but I don't know a better term to use. Montgomery Community College, or Montgomery College, in collaboration with Montgomery County Public Schools and the universities at Shady Grove, have implemented a new program called Achieving Collegiate Excellence and Success. It's called abbreviated ACES. The ACES program, which is to provide mentoring and coaching of high school students at each age grade level to prepare them, to help them with their academics and prepare them for college or university should they choose to go on with higher education. But it certainly helps them to graduate with a high school diploma at the bare minimum. The program includes a 3-week program for rising 11th graders, which provides refreshing courses in English, math, reading, and English as a second language. The youth that they're targeting are, as I said, at risk. They've got criteria, and I'm going to pass this sheet out to my colleagues, but it includes young people who are coming from families below the poverty line, that have physical or learning disabilities, are historically, they're in the historically underrepresented population within higher education, and there's several other criteria. But what I am asking my colleagues to include in the budget this year is $30,000 for the ACES program to ensure that every qualifying Tacoma Park child who is rising 11th grader to participate in this program, and the money will be used to provide the faculty transportation and meals to participate in this program. And I think this is an important component that, as I said, dovetails well with the other programs that you have. And I appreciate the vocational training piece that's in here. It obviously, as this program moves along through the years, the vocational training is going to be easier when the young people have their high school diploma. And the summer job placement program, again, dovetails very well with this, as it helps them to prepare for the responsibilities of employment. Thank you. And I'll pass a summary sheet to my colleagues.
Councilmember Mayo, you had something?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to staff for all coming tonight. A couple of comments. This summer jobs pilot, I think, is a great idea. But I think that the presentation about the speed cameras before is an interesting contrast, where we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to take precious care of 8 or 10 cameras. And what we do there is we use an outside firm because they have this huge capacity behind the people that are actually working in our community. And so I'm fully supportive of the pilot, as you've described it, and frankly of Councilmember Seaman's proposal. But I would really want us, when we think about the next year, moving beyond the pilot, of whether we should provide the services or whether we should provide the $10,000 or the minimum wage positions, and find someone else's program that's a bigger program, that's better staffed, that's been running successfully, and try to just join their program. I personally don't see, I think if Tacoma Park has primarily a bedroom community in a vibrant urban area, I don't think it's nice, but I don't think it's essential that they have to be Tacoma Park employers. And so, I'm supportive of any positions, any jobs, the most relevant jobs, the most relevant sort of positions and career opportunities that these people could benefit from. So again, I'm supportive of the pilot approach, but I would just want to think about whether we can use someone else's program and pay our way into it. I know at some point the council will have conversations about the rec center on New Hampshire Avenue and the county and long-term costs and quality of the infrastructure. And I just noted that the the membership base for fitness and gym and fitness only is a relatively small number of people. And so I think of what is our cost to provide that service versus what is the cost of just paying for those members to join another gym. If we were to subsidize a YMCA membership, what would that cost us? And so I just want us to be cognizant of that cost. Again, it's about, if there's a better gym somewhere else, it doesn't mean we have to build one to compete. We could find a way to provide fitness services to a population that maybe can't afford the YMCA membership by paying for it for them. And then, and this is a comment, Greg, not specific to your budget, but I noticed, and we talked about the police department budget and FTEs and vacancies, and I just wonder if we could establish a metric for the budget that would be, that HR could help with, that would, for every position, an FTE is a full-time person for 360, or not 365, but however many days there are in a work year. And so presumably we could calculate how many days each position that the city has is actually filled. The goal would be to have every budgeted position filled for the entire term of its the year. And so if we had stats that showed, okay, how many, what if we approve 50 FTEs or 100 FTEs or whatever the number is for a department, what do we actually achieve at the end of the year? Was it actually the equivalent to 83 FTEs because of vacancies or repeated vacancies? And my goal, I think, would be to try to have that number be as close as possible to what we fund. And that's the sort of thing that could come out in the audit, during the audit process as a supplement to the audit, or it could be a FY whatever estimated actual sort of thing that shows up in the next year's budget. So thank you for your presentation. I don't have more specific questions. Good work. Thank you.
I've just got a couple of quick questions. On page 113, you talk about the transaction costs associated with online registrations, and I'm just wondering if we know that we're doing that the same way as most other recreation programs are doing in this area, where the government pays the transaction fee, and how we feel about the cost of that's going in. Is it adequately being reflected in the fees that we charge? So I'm just trying to get a general sense of how that's working.
Excuse me. Initially, when I researched the online software in other recreation departments, most departments were passing the fees on to the customer. So it was almost a cost of business. Of course, when we decided to go with ActiveNet, it was decided, that the city would essentially take on the majority of those fees, I believe, with the exception of the credit card fee. But most recreation departments at that time, 4 years ago, passed on those costs to the customer. I can go back out and check with other.
Do we know if they've changed or if they're continuing to do that?
I haven't checked with any other department since the initial research.
Has anybody noticed that we do this and commented favorably on it? Have they commented, about, gee, well, you do it this way and we're awfully grateful and we come to you because you do it this way, we don't go to those other places? I'm just trying to determine how this is playing, since we're obviously doing it differently than most.
Right. The only comments that we've received actually is from ActiveNet when we call, and I've had questions.
They said, you want to do what?
Yeah. When I was dealing with our account rep, they commented that most communities usually pass those on, and it was a unique situation. And in creating the contract, they had never written a contract like that, so they had to go and, of course,
they had to change their software.
Yeah, they had to change their structure in the way that they administered their contracts to make sure it reflected that the city was paying for all of that.
Okay.
So.
I won't advocate for changing that, but I'll just note that if we were ever looking for approximately $30,000, that there's a place that we might consider.
Right. I'm sorry, Jared. I do want to say that since we have been using the recreation software, that our revenues have been increasing, and we actually are providing a better service to our customers with the ability to register from home,
Right.
register from work, and they don't have to come into the
Right.
to the facility.
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah.
What would be the individual fee for if we passed it on to residents or non-residents here?
Well, there's a $3 transaction fee that we pay, and if the $3 transaction fee, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me, that if they register from our location, each time we register someone, that's a $3 transaction fee. If they register from home, that's a percentage that we pay. But if the credit card percentage is the percentage that we pass on to the customer. So there's a transaction fee, which is a percentage. And if we register them here, there's a $3 fee. We don't assume the percentage at that point. But the credit card fee, we pass on to the customer.
Okay, and so we just have to recognize that by the figures you gave us, that slightly over 50% of our participants are non-residents, and we're subsidizing them by
Yes.
paying this fee for non-residents who are not giving us tax dollars,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. So
Yes.
that's an interesting
Yeah. How-
take on the resident, non-resident
Yes.
split. And how we do
However,
this.
we do charge higher fees for programs
Right.
for non-residents. So there is a cost difference.
Yep.
Across the board for all programs?
For the majority of our programs, yes.
And just two other quick observations. On page 117, the last performance workload measure, staff participation in local festivals and special events. I'm wondering whether that's the number of staff who participate in those or the number of events that staff participates in. What's that number?
That's the total number of staff.
Who at one time or another participate in a special event?
Yes, and what we do, and we participate in just about all of the special events, but we've begun to provide marketing for our programs and services at these special events, the folk festival, the jazz festival, just a lot of the large special events throughout the city, and we actually provide staff to assist in some of those activities. And this,
They're not recreation department.
right? They're not
activities.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
And at one point, we didn't provide any.
Right.
So,
I'd suggest in the future maybe adding a word or two to that one so it's clear what that represents. And the same thing on page 123, the next to the last performance workload measure where it says implement summer specialty camps. And I thought, okay, is that implement new? Is that the raw number of specialty camps? Is it the
Okay.
number of participants? I'm not sure what it is. The rest of them in here are clear that, what the number represents. Other questions? Oh, give me a chance to say, Councilmember-elect Stewart.
Greg, thanks for the presentation. On the slide 4 that you showed us the breakdown by ward and participation, does the department have any goal for sort of making that a little bit more equal, or?
yes. What we do is we take this and of course we try to use it to target certain wards, and we notice what wards that we aren't reaching a lot of residents. And yes, our goal is to serve as many residents in each ward. In a perfect world, it will be equitable. But it's just not. But we do pay attention to it just to see where our participation is coming from, and to see what we can do to increase participation in certain areas.
Great. And the other thing I noticed on many of the budgets that itemize that the miscellaneous category is fairly large, and for example, on community programs, it's 67% of that budget. And I just maybe in the future, if more of those things were itemized, I think that might be a good way to move, just so that we could see, particularly when it's 67% of the budget, some of the items broken out more. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens and I were just conferring about the non-resident percentage and the fact that that doesn't get reflected in the rebate discussions, in the tax duplication, in the county tax duplication discussions. Somebody else down here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because the county, with regard to tax duplication, would like to make the argument that we are a drain on the county when it comes to recreation, and in fact, that's completely backwards. We supplement the households. We provide services to households that are outside of our city, and sure, we charge a little bit higher fees, but that's not much of a burden. And so we really are providing services that are not reflected in tax duplication. I know Ms. Ludlow has long made that argument over and over again to very thick-skulled heads in Rockville. So,
What are their names?
Just give us some initials. And are you able to break down which ones are Montgomery versus Prince George's, or the district in the software the way you've got it?
No.
If we had to?
No, I
What
don't
proportion
think
of
we-
them are associated with the schools that are here in Tacoma Park? Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, what school the young person attends really isn't a field that we capture. It's just the age range, general information, what ward they live in. We would actually have to program that into the software.
My assumption had been, for no particularly good reason, was that a large proportion of the non-residents were kids who attend Piney Branch or Tacoma Park elementary schools, and maybe less proportion who attend the middle school.
Right, and I think a large portion of them also participate in our winter basketball league. I think that's where a lot of them are coming from, in our sports leagues.
okay, in this chart that's on the screen right now, shows like Ward 6, where the rec center is, sits right, smack in the middle of that ward, and yet it's one of the wards that has the fewest participation, the lowest participation in absolute numbers and in relative numbers of all the wards in the city. And you'd think that with the rec center right there, that wouldn't be the case. So I'm wondering what is that telling us? Is that telling us that, and I'm not sure what it's telling us, but it could be that somehow or another the people in that part of the city aren't paying attention, or when they think of the rec center, they have negative thoughts about it. It's sort of like, oh, well, I don't really want to go there. I'd rather go somewhere else. I don't know, but that is something I think we need to think about.
You think it might be because the rec center is, it's kind of a resource constrained? If they put all the recreational focus on just the rec center, that maybe there's not enough outreach for the other programs?
I don't know. It could be. I was over there last week for the special open house. Had a chance to kind of spend 3 hours talking to the staff and talking to the elderly people. Well, I call them elderly people who are over age 55, which is definitely not
the experienced residents.
The wise people, the elders of our community. And you go into the exercise, the fitness room, which obviously it's got lots of equipment in it. Aesthetically, it's not the nicest place in the world. There are no windows. My wife has used it, and sometimes it needs to be heated when it's being chilled, and it's being chilled when it needs to be heated, and things like that. And there's nothing you can do about it because the building is what it is. It's just a small space. One could make the argument, well, at least we have what we have there. We could have just an empty room. So I think it's a building that was built in the 1970s, and it needs to be, in my opinion, replaced, which is another topic for another evening. When we had the open house, that was coordinated with the tenant association at Hampshire Towers, in which there's a number of people older than 55. And unfortunately, basically no one from that building showed up for that particular event, even though there was a really strong effort made. And I think that speaks to the fact that even though it's within literal stone's throws, 50 yards from one building to the other building, that there's really going to have to be some clever thought given to how we induce people to come out of their apartments and come to that building to take advantage of these senior programs that you're proposing to do, because it's just such a huge potential for fun, exercise, literal recreation. And one of the things that was pointed out to me, which I have to agree with, is that when they had play little bingo. Paula Lasowski on your staff was sort of leading that process, and everybody gravitated to that all of a sudden because they were giving away little prizes for that, and it was a lot of fun. And I watched it all, and even though bingo is sort of like something everybody snickers about, that's not really recreation, but it's the sort of thing that older folks, it's an icebreaker to get people to come in. It's something they can relate to. When you talk about Zumba, a lot of people don't know what that is. It sounds, well, who knows what it sounds like. But those kinds of things, just what you want to do is get people to come in the door. And once you get them in the door, through that threshold, then you can say, here, let us show you around. Let us tell you about the programs we have, and let me introduce you to the staff, and all of a sudden they're going to feel warm and welcomed and safe. And I think that's the kind of thinking we need to be doing with regard to that recreation center, at least until we can come up with a better facility.
I have a question regarding the data, since we've been discussing it, the program participation by ward. The next, I see the note there at the bottom of the table, unique household active net accounts by ward. So we're actually counting accounts. It would be useful, for instance, to know count of accounts that have actually been used. In other words, that aren't. There might be accounts that are from 2010 that are still in the system but haven't been used in 2012 to 2014. But further, the table after shows total participation by age, and that number, of course, is different. 16,242 for 2012 to 14 versus 6,246 accounts. So that suggests about 2.6, maybe something like that, program registrations per account as an average. But the second table does show that you're able to count particular registrations. I guess it's an extra step maybe to classify them by ward. So it would be good to know not just the active net accounts, but the actual program participation by ward. And in particular, in order to substantiate the non-resident numbers.
Okay.
It would be great to have that soon if you have the capacity to generate those numbers. And the reason for asking is just is particularly the tax duplication types of arguments that we make.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
I mean, just one final point on the numbers by ward. I would just suggest we look at the demographics of each ward before we read too much into those numbers, because it could be population of children, population of seniors differs by ward, which should be available in the census, and that could make up, it's not a huge difference. So that could make up some of the difference between ward.
When you look at the camps slide that's in the book that we have, the number of participants in counselor in training program, is it supposed to be that low, or are you trying to have more kids and kids aren't participating?
No, we
This is page 123.
yes, we actually have a limited number of opportunities. When you have counselors in training that you're training, you actually have to have staff that are training them. And we have approximately 100 kids participating in our camps, and the majority of our camps are usually full.
Right.
So we have at least 10 staff that are actively participating with the kids. The counseling and training program, we would have to put an additional staff person with those folks. And then we have a certain number of senior staff, a certain number of young kids, 13-year-olds that we hire. So we have to have a certain number of senior staff and place a counselor or a counselor and training person, a younger staff with them, because we're not going to put a young person with a young person to train a young person. So it all breaks down to the number of staff that we have, and we don't put counselors in training with all of our programs either. We have some contractor-led camps where we don't put counselor in training kids with those camps, because those camps are usually specialty camps, and parents are paying a higher price to be a part of those camps. So
Okay.
we're very selective in where we place kids.
Now, the number of kids that may not be able to financially afford any of our programs, is that number going up? I didn't see any
The
data.
number of kids that can't afford it?
Can't afford it, that we have to give some type of subsidy or.
Yeah, I haven't provided numbers of scholarships, but we do offer a large number of scholarships. I can provide that to everyone.
Tell us, are they being used? Are the scholarships being used?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. We utilize scholarships in the majority of our programs. We don't provide scholarships for adult programs,
Right.
but all of
For
our
the youth programs.
young people programs. Mm-hmm.
And finally, last year I asked you about redeveloping the New Hampshire Avenue site. Has the county reached out to you to talk to you about changing ownership of the site or doing anything or providing any more money for it, or have they discussed it at all?
Are you in a dream world?
Well, I mean, they're
making a point.
They're asking us for money for the swimming pool. So has this site come up in any discussions with the county?
The site came up, I want to say a little over a year ago, where the county is in the exploration stages of trying to figure out what to do with it, and they wanted to see if the city of Tacoma Park is interested in that site.
So did we send any response to that, or?
Well, we've met with them, but I think we've been trying to be very clear that we're not interested in simply taking on additional costs. And I think they appreciate, the staff that have talked to us about that kind of understand that we're in a strange situation. But right now we've just kind of put them off a little bit while we're doing, some kind of bigger picture discussions.
Okay. Thank you. And it was a good presentation.
Okay. Thanks very much for your presentation. thanks to all the recreation staff who are here for all the work that you do, and thanks to the Recreation Committee for all that you do as well. We're going to do Housing and Community Development next. And after we do HCD, we'll take a short break.
Well, the place is really emptying out.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, teacher.
Our slide, like others, gives you a sense of where we're at as far as the budget proposed for FY15. You'll note that our revenues have increased slightly, and as noted in the comments, a majority of that are from rental housing license fees. The fee at the current moment is $101 per licensed unit, and the amount varies depending upon how many annual and biennial licenses are due at any particular point in time, and the fee increases based on the Consumer Price Index each year. Our expenditures at $1.6 million have dropped at roughly 7%, and that's due in large part to an anticipated reduction in the need to contract out for services. This past year, we had a large number of contracts that were either proposed or carried over from prior years, and that's the primary cause of the reduction in the budget. Our FTEs have also dropped. That does not reflect a change in number of personnel. It's primarily an accounting measure in terms of pulling the interns that we have in our planning department and putting them, or not including them in the FTE count. And our capital budget has increased to $408,000, which is a jump of 140%, and that's due in large part to the grants funds that we're anticipating spending on Ethan Allen in the upcoming fiscal year. What I've attempted to do is to identify some new programming for FY15 that ties back to the Council's priorities as far as funding for FY15, economic development, environmental sustainability, and quality of life. One of the things I wanted to point out before I go into each of these is that the department also administers programs or oversees projects that are not necessarily in our budget. So several of these are going to be in the Special Revenue Fund budget, the non-departmental budget, or the capital improvement budget. So for under economic development, a new program that we're proposing are entering into contracts for service for economic development support with the two existing business associations we have in the community, the Main Street Tacoma or Old Tacoma Business Association and the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area. Historically, the council has funded the OTBA, but that's more of a memorandum of agreement. This would shift the focus a little bit more and be more specifically related to economic development activities that would benefit the area and supplement the services that the department already currently provides. We're also proposing funding for an evaluation, if you will, for the Tacoma Recreation Center in New Hampshire Avenue, which you were just discussing with Mr. Clark. Under environmental sustainability, we have 3 projects I thought I would point out. One is the Maryland Bikeways project. This is not included in our departmental budget, but comes out of the Special Revenue Fund. Those are grant dollars that we've secured from the Maryland Department of Transportation to undertake a number of bike-related improvements, including the installation of sharrows on Carroll Avenue, I believe, with the bulk of the funding going towards the Ethan Allen Streetscape project to augment funding for the creation of bike lanes. The Holton Lane Gateway Improvement Project is also not in our budget, but comes out of their capital improvement budget, and that's a general fund project that we're looking at doing some landscaping, sculpture types of improvements for the area across from You know where Holton Lane butts into New Hampshire Avenue? It's on the opposite side of the commercial area. There's a small strip of property that the city owns that is generally kind of a mess. So we thought we would beautify that, if you will, and use it as a way of demarking the commercial area, but also address ongoing maintenance concerns that the Public Works Department has.
I'm not sure I know where you're speaking of.
It's directly,
Which, east or west side of New Hampshire?
Your side.
no, it's a little further down.
West
You know, when
side.
you get out, when you drive out of Holton Lane
Yeah,
and you're facing New Hampshire Avenue,
yeah.
it's like across the street on the other side.
Any bamboo there?
Excuse me?
Is there any bamboo there?
I don't know if there's bamboo there, but there are people there that aren't supposed to be there. I can show it to you on a map.
Is that where, up near the 76?
It's not that far. It's a little further south.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very narrow strip.
We had a problem with homeless
Yes,
sleeping there a
that's the
couple
area.
years ago.
Yeah, that's the
And
area.
you're, okay, so that, all right, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, in conversations with Public Works Department, that area is problematic as far as ongoing maintenance costs, and it would be a nice small project that would serve a variety of purposes.
What type of maintenance issues are there?
It's an awkward location, it's an awkward shape, it's not high on anybody's priority list right now. And there's a lot of trash and debris there. The plantings are not necessarily low maintenance. So we're hoping to do something to...
Is this the re-landscaping or any hard surfacing?
Not sure about, I can't go into great detail because it hasn't been
Okay.
planned yet,
All right.
but it could be any number of things.
Okay.
And then last, under the environmental sustainability, I just included one of our special revenue fund projects. This is a CDBG grant award that has been approved by the council and endorsed by the county council for the Crossroads Community Food Network. They are undertaking an enterprise training and mentorship program that's targeted towards food producers and people that are doing value added to local food production. This will be this is the first time that they'll have received funding for that particular project. And then under quality of life, I just identified two programs that are new for FY15. The community grants funds that we had talked about earlier this year for cultural and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math projects. That's included in your non-departmental budget, and we're proposing $60,000 for that. And then a mentorship and tutoring program at the Essex House that comes out of our special revenue fund program, and that's going to be offered by the African Immigrant and Refugee Foundation.
And when are they supposed to start that program?
These things will, in FY15, I don't know the exact date, because that particular project is funded with grant monies. It depends on when we get the contract from the county and when the start date is on that. I'm hoping it'll be July 1st or very close to it.
And before you go off that page, just back up to the first item for a second. I want to make sure I understood correctly on the contract for services for Main Street. You're saying the existing 30,000 that we've had is going to shift focus slightly? Okay.
Correct. Be more
Yeah,
focused on economic development related support services for the department.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Just as a point of clarification, right now the OTBA gets $55,000. 15 of that is for programming at the Tacoma Junction, and then the balance is a match, or the $30,000 for their operating support. The way that we have proposed the grant program that is in your non-departmental fund, and that would include like the arts grants that I just mentioned, OTBA or another organization, even the Crossroads Community CDA, or excuse me, the Tacoma Langley Crossroads CDA, could apply for grant funds for programming that would be outside of that contract for services.
So I want to make sure I understand. The 60,000 is 30,000 each, or it's 60?
30,000 each.
Okay. And the 30,000 is kind of like a reprogramming of a good chunk of what OTBA has been getting in the way of support. in the
It's
current
more,
budget.
it's more of a contract for services as opposed to a memorandum of agreement for operating subsidy.
Right.
So if OTBA, for example, wanted additional funding to offset some of the programming that they're doing up in the Junction, the Grand Avenue Market, for example, they could submit a grant application to augment those costs through the Cultural and STEM Project grant program.
But it sounds like it's going to shift focus and shift the structure of how we give them some money to augment what we do.
Correct. Be more of an economic development focus, which is my understanding is a priority of the council.
Okay.
My recollection had been that OTBA had that the council agreed to 3 years of funding at the $30,000 level, and this would have been the third year. Not that I've heard any squawking from OTBA about that.
The agreement that you have with OTBA right now, I haven't looked at it recently, but it's my understanding that the agreement itself has been extended for a 3-year term, but the actual funding is an annual decision on the part of the council.
Sure, but the structure of the agreement was not a contract for services, but rather a grant as an operating subsidy without any conditions on it. But then again, I have talked to Rocco Casagrande about this, and not a couple of months ago, and he wasn't squawking about doing a contract for services. So that was more a remark, something that I want to check in on, though. I am curious, though. I actually have another remark that Laura Barclay from OTBA told me that they're making good progress with Washington, D.C. on getting funding from the D.C. government that would be comparable in scale to Tacoma Parks. I did ask Melanie Isis from the CDA about Prince George's kicking in something that would match what the city did, and I don't recall getting an answer from that. I don't know if Councilmember Schultz has any kind of response on that, or whether you do. Given the location of the CDA, it would certainly be reasonable to expect Prince George's to match what the city puts in. And the same thing applies to the market study along New Hampshire Avenue corridor that you haven't talked about yet.
Let me do the Crossroads one first.
Yeah, sorry. Is there? So I just want to pull that apart a little bit. So
the principle is that when the city puts in money on to organizations that or initiatives that are on or cross borders, that it's entirely reasonable to expect the jurisdictions on the other side of the border to match our funds.
Sorry, is the question, are you suggesting that we should make that a requirement for fiscal year 15?
We haven't made a requirement for OTBA, and I wouldn't make it a requirement, but the arrangement with the CDA is new.
I thought we had made a requirement last year.
It is a requirement.
We made it a requirement for additional funds.
Right.
Above 30?
Yeah.
Above 30.
Above 35, although there was a question about how that was read, but that was last year. Or this current year.
The biggest difference between the two organizations is that the OTBA, they've drawn their line that includes the D.C. area, and they currently provide services to those organizations. It's part of their mission. It's part of all their marketing materials. They include those businesses, and those businesses are engaged in the operations of OTBA. The CDA is not structured that way. If you look at their boundary, it is limited to Tacoma Park. There's nothing in there that's outside of the city limits, and it does not cross over into Prince George's County. So right now, there is no business representation from any of those property owners or the businesses that operate there.
No, it's a good point that it's structured differently. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And frankly, the CDA is going through a transition period right now, and to make that a requirement in addition to this whole shifting over into a new leadership organization and a new membership structure could be problematic and could be counterproductive.
Yeah, there's something to be explained, and that is that unlike the OTBA, the CDA is a management corporation under Maryland law, and all the businesses are required by law to pay a licensure fee. which brings in about $80,000 a year to the CDA. So the difference with the OTBA is that they have membership fees, but not all businesses are required to belong to the OTBA, and some aren't. But they all tend to benefit by virtue of being adjacent to one another. And we've never, as a city council, said to them, well, if you want to get $30,000 or $55,000 from us, you have to get X dollars from your members. And I'm fine with that. So the CDA is a different animal because they are raising their own money and have been doing so for 27 years. Businesses have been paying without a dollar coming from the city. So in this case, they are matching. They have been matching money for many, many years. We've just never contributed anything to the CDA. And I think that's a difference that needs to be apparent.
As far as the New Hampshire Avenue Court, excuse me, I'm looking at a different slide than is on the screen. As far as the market study for the New Hampshire Avenue, the focus for that particular funding would be on the Tacoma Recreation Center. We have had conversations with Park and Planning and Park staff since predating Greg's appointment as the director of the department. And given the change in the economy at this particular point in time, it makes sense to go through and evaluate what our redevelopment options are for that particular property. It has some challenges regarding its configuration. It's not very big. There's no access to it. A large part of it is wooded. And there are conditions that would be placed on the transfer of that ownership over to the city. So we're hoping to be able to have an opportunity and the resources to evaluate what our options are for that particular property and how it fits into the council's overarching goals regarding providing recreational services to the community.
So we would be doing a market study of a county-owned property?
We would be doing a market study or an evaluation of the existing facility. It could be a variety of things. One, is it worth renovating and using purely for recreational purposes? Does it make sense to market it for redevelopment and then require that the person who acquires that property incorporate recreational facilities within the new development? A variety of things. But yes, we would be evaluating a piece of property that technically we do not own right now.
I think one of the options that ought to be weighed, if you could, within that $40,000, maybe you can, is whether it makes sense to have a recreation center on that particular piece of real estate at all.
That's one of the options on the list, if you will.
It might make sense to have somebody else build it, one of the developers in the crossroads,
right,
as part of their.
Mm-hmm. Is it an appropriately sized structure? Is it in the appropriate location for the clientele that it's targeting?
I mean, the advantage of having that option is that you get a new rec center, and then you tear down the old one. Whereas if you tear down the old one to put a new one there, you're going to be out of a rec center and out of rec programs. And what do you do with all the employees and all the for 2 years?
Yeah, there are lots of possibilities,
yeah, so
and
that's just one of the things that needs to be thrown onto the griddle.
So this will give us an opportunity to start that evaluation process.
Sarah, I'm assuming that it's true that, as was said during the recreation conversation, what are we doing, how are we continuing these conversations with the county and with Park and Planning about the facility, that some of the results and some of the analysis that could come from a study like this would be helpful in terms of us and our thinking about what happens going forward with that facility, with this other party that owns it. Because, again, we've just been talking without really having a lot of analysis necessarily behind some of the decisions that potentially could be in front of us.
Right. The last conversation I had with the county, for example, is, they're willing to turn it over to us today. But the response from our perspective is that thank you, but until we actually know what we're going to do with it or what our options are, we don't really want to, nor are we in a position to assume ownership for it. The other thing that you should keep in mind is that it would be a swap. So if the county were to turn this property over to the city of Tacoma Park, because of funding limitations and restrictions and all of that, we would have to give them something in exchange that would have an equal, or that would be recreation focused. There has been a very small sliver of property that's, a quarter of a city lot, if you will, that is one of the last remaining pieces that they need to make the Long Branch area whole, if you will. City owns it. We're not doing anything with it. And that would be the property that they would be willing to swap out with us, even though there may not be the same financial value or monetary value associated with it, nor from the same size. So there are a lot of different ways this is going to have to work.
We could give them all of the money from the rebate for recreation services that we haven't been receiving for all these years.
I don't think that's an option, but I'll mention that to Mark the next time I talk to him.
I've specifically mentioned to multiple county council members that I would seek, as an interim solution on tax duplication, an exemption for Tacoma Park property owners from the line item recreational tax. It's 3 mills last I looked, and has been for several years. Gaithersburg, Washington Grove, and Rockville property owners are exempted from the recreational tax, and that gets nowhere. I would not make any deal on the rec center on New Hampshire Avenue unless the recreation portion of tax duplication were addressed, and it could easily be addressed, separated out from the rest of the tax duplication picture, given the precedent of Gaithersburg and Rockville. I won't bother with Washington Grove, because I don't even know where that is, other than Montgomery County.
It's behind Gaithersburg.
Moving on.
Yes?
As many of you know, we provide a plethora of services, and rather than go through all of them, I just pulled out some that I wanted to highlight.
Is that a word that got dropped from the SAT?
And I'm even amazed that I sort of kind of maybe pronounced it correctly, but yes. Economic development. We have our exterior home repair program that we're hoping that you will refund again at the same level in FY14. That's where we go through and do exterior repairs to properties that have either been identified as being in noncompliance with the property maintenance code. It's targeted towards a very specific income bracket. I believe we're at 60 or 80% of the area median AMI. And if you recall, when we did our roundtables, I gave you a whole lot of information in terms of what those people look like and what the property conditions are in. Collectively, we have about $51,000 earmarked for programming along New Hampshire Avenue. And that includes everything from landscape maintenance to placemaking improvements to continuation of the new app website, just a hodgepodge of things to continue that ongoing effort to keep it in the forefront of people's view of Tacoma Park and to reinforce the importance of redevelopment along that particular corridor. We have under the economic development category, we're continuing the new neighborhood commercial district improvement program. This is something that's included in the capital improvements budget and we alternate it every other year. These would be small improvements to the various commercial areas in Tacoma Park that are not necessarily, but could include the CDA Crossroads area as well as OTBA jurisdiction. So this would be Erie and Flower, Maple and Sherman, Long Branch, things that we can do that are fairly small in nature but could improve the appearance or the attractiveness of that area for residents in the adjoining neighborhood. We also have funding in both the capital budget and in the non-departmental budget for arts programming and for public art. Under environmental sustainability, our Safe Routes to School program, which does not need to be explained. And then for the Safe Routes to School program, yes. Yeah, we're into program year F, which would be like the sixth successful program. And then the anti-littering campaign, we've included $7,000 in just costs associated with continuing that initiative. That does not include staffing costs. And then under quality of life, continuation of the rental housing licensing program. That's estimated, the contract we have for inspections with Montgomery County to continue that effort is $215,000. A continuation of our successful tenant capacity initiative program at a little bit higher than in FY14, bumping it up to $30,000. And then the emergency assistance fund at $30,000, which is in your non-departmental budget. And that includes the one-time infusion of resources or money to people that may be in arrears in their rent, facing eviction, food, healthcare, things like that.
And who's that supplied through?
We just issued a request for proposals. Submissions were due on Monday, and we only received one response from Ministries United Silver Spring Tacoma Park. They've been administering the program on the behalf of the city for the last 3 years, and they've done an excellent job.
Did they run out of money last year?
No, we were able to.
Okay.
We're fine right now. Well, in addition to the resources or the money that the council budgets, we also solicit donations from the community, and that supplements the funds that you have budgeted in the past.
What are the requirements for getting assistance from them? Because I had a complaint from someone who said that they sought assistance and were told to go to Health and Human Services. So.
They have a relationship there where they will work together. So they will occasionally refer people to other agencies that may be a better fit. And then they also are part of a network to ensure that the people that have a need are being met. And so you don't have one person jumping from agency to agency getting assistance for the same issue. Their criteria, I think we're at 60% of the area median income, and they need to be a resident of Tacoma Park, and they need to be able to document the need.
Thank you.
So do we track these people? I mean, once we give them this assistance, do we track and figure out if they're getting assistance from other organizations or that this problem has really been resolved?
No, not formally.
Okay. I mean, is it possible that we can track them?
We could try. Frequently, a lot of the people that are taking advantage of the program are really, we can try. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
These are what you might characterize as desperate situations.
Correct.
Where people need money now to pay rent or pay a mortgage payment or to pay a
Or pay the
extraordinary
Pepco bill so
bill.
they can get their power turned on or avoid having it turned off.
Yeah, it's just a
things like
one-time
that.
thing. There's no real, it's not like enrolling somebody in food stamps or when you might say, oh, they're not really qualified or
Yeah.
something.
Exactly.
But do we know that once you give them the money for that one time, that resolves the issue?
Yes, the payment goes to the landlord or to the utility company or goes.
Right, but I'm saying that, is it reoccurring? I mean, you can say, okay, I'm in arrears for a month, 2 months, 3 months. You get the payment. Is the situation that has made them so that they don't have the money, has that been taken care of?
Musiki, who administers the program on behalf of the city, makes referrals to other agencies, which is part of the reason they get referred to HHS at the county level, so that they can get into those ongoing assistance programs. But we do not track it.
Okay.
You go, sir.
Yeah, a few comments and questions. The $214,000 we pay for the county services in terms of code enforcement, how does that number compare from previous years, or is there any way to compare that in the budget? That's not a line item anywhere in the.
It's in the contracts budget for the code enforcement department.
But it would be mixed up with other contracts.
It's mixed up with other things. It's like a 2 or 3% increase from prior
Okay.
years.
And then just because I've been getting questions from residents about this, we haven't changed the way we approach code enforcement, excepting that we're treating group houses somewhat differently.
When the council went through and amended its Chapter 6 housing code, there's a new provision in there regarding the registration of owner-occupied group homes. It's a 3-year registration, and the primary intent is to ensure that the basic life safety requirements of a house have been satisfied so that the people that are living there and paying for the use of the room or whatever are not at risk of burning up or
Okay.
getting trapped.
And these are group houses where the residents in the house share a bathroom and kitchen
They have
facilities.
to share a bathroom and
It's
a
a
kitchen.
specific class.
Yeah, it's a very
Okay.
specific class. So it doesn't include a variety of structures.
Okay.
But it's definitely owner-occupied group homes.
And if I can just piggyback on that for a second, on page 140 on your performance and workload measures, the one that I had a question about was the first one, public contacts, where the number goes way down from the last 2 years. Do you know why that is? That's for code enforcement?
Yeah, well, gotta look here. What page?
140,
Oh, yeah.
the first
And
one. in
Bruce,
the-
you're specifically talking about sort of the projected for 15,
Right.
going down to 2,900, which is our,
Right. And so I'm
our
wondering
guess.
what that
I
reflects.
have different page numbers than you do, apparently.
Code enforcement.
Yeah. The challenge that I have to face is that historically I've always reported these out on a calendar year. So I was asked to flip it over into a fiscal year. So using my basic algebra skills, and that I had about a half hour to do it, it's kind of like a formula of the numbers mushed together, if you will. That's not a very
So we
good explanation.
we shouldn't pay any attention to that number.
No, they are an accurate representation of the number of contacts. Whether it falls within that particular time period, I can't swear by it, but it does give you a sense of it.
Because it just looks like a continuation of a trend over the 3 years that we have, that the public contacts just continue to drop like a stone on code
A
enforcement.
lot of that has to do with the fact that we're getting dramatically different or dramatically fewer complaints regarding rental housing properties. And we're also getting fewer complaints from the public regarding property maintenance issues. So we are getting fewer and fewer complaints. So the number, the reduction in the number is accurate.
And this can be contacts through any means.
Walk-ins, phone calls, emails,
Okay.
active,
What, the website?
GovQA, the website, yeah.
Same table, staff-initiated inspections conducted has gone up, has doubled, and the year before that went up 500%-ish. So I just want to make sure that we're not, if complaints are going down, if essentially rental houses or housing in general is in better shape, that we're not just keeping inspectors busy. in terms
No,
of-
we're not keeping inspectors busy. And the numbers for that
So they're not
particular,
busy?
they are very busy. I shouldn't say that. It's not make work. The variation in the numbers there are just fluctuations in staffing levels. So for those periods when it's dropped, it's because I haven't had an inspector. Or I have a new inspector that's in training and they're in training, so they're not conducting as many inspections as one would typically anticipate.
So it shouldn't go up again next year.
It might very well go up again next year because we have a new inspector on staff and he's
'Cause I would just
coming
think
up to.
I would just think of a 4-year pattern as a trend, not
Yeah.
not fluctuation of staffing and stuff.
It depends on what's going on. I mean, that's the biggest challenge, frankly, I have with the budgets and the performance data for our department. A lot of the stuff that we do is on demand. It's not an ongoing thing. So, contracts for services, for example, it depends on what the demand is for that particular project. So, I will budget a certain dollar amount anticipating a variety of, or a certain number of fair return rent increase petitions. But if I don't get any fair return rent increase petitions, I don't need to incur the cost of having the analysts go through and look at the request. Same thing with code enforcement activity. It varies depending upon what weather conditions have been like, what staffing levels are, how diligent people might or might not be regarding filing complaints or mowing their lawn. I mean, or shoveling sidewalks. You know.
Although the ones I was asking about were staff initiated.
Right. So that would be sidewalks, overgrown yards,
Right.
abandoned vehicles,
Okay.
trees on roofs, things like that.
A couple of years ago, your code enforcement supervisor initiated kind of a sweep of Ward 6, which was sort of unprecedented, and they spent the better part of a year focusing systematically through the whole area in New Hampshire Gardens, and that would have involved a lot of staff-initiated contacts, because you were out literally looking for trouble rather than waiting for complaints to come in.
Right. And frankly, it's proven to be an effective way of addressing property maintenance issues, because if there is a property that it is potentially going to be a problem, we generally get it before it gets too far in the process and becomes a really big deal as far as mitigating the problem.
Two more points. There's a metric in here around the number of families served by the exterior housing repair program, dropping from 35 to 20. Is that because we had a budget amendment where we added more funding, and you don't feel it's appropriate to keep it at the 35 households per year? Okay.
20 is appropriate. The 35 is in large part because of an overlap in contracts with Habitat for Humanity.
Okay, thank you. And then my final point, where I'd like more explanation, but also I have an opinion already too, is on page 134, the opening page, the department summary, where we've moved all the FTEs into administration. And I know that was an issue and a somewhat of a debate on council when that was done with the rec department previous years. And I'm just I'm somewhat skeptical of doing that. Why do it in this department, not other departments, or would another department be next year? So what's the explanation for that, and why shouldn't I be proposing to change it?
This was my proposal. I did not realize it was an issue with the city council, frankly. And from my perspective as someone who has to oversee all the budgets and for the staff, and the fact that our programming changes so dramatically from one year to another, that people shift from different divisions and different funds, it's purely an administrative decision, and if the council wishes to move them all back, we would move them back, but they would not look the way they did last year because we have different programming.
That the programming changes so much from year to year is all the more reason, in my mind, to account for staff by program. That is the only way we're going to really know the actual cost of these programs, and that applies to Recreation Department as well. We did, before the city manager started, have the changeover in the Recreation Department last year, and I know that I wasn't the only council member who didn't like to see all of those staff and the associated staff costs moved into an administration category rather than a program category. So I would welcome systematically or undoing this. It's okay to, stop there. I'd like to see staff accounted for by major program areas.
Just one correction. Ms. Dane said that it was her decision.
My record.
Certainly, it was my decision. So if there's any blame to be had, it should be pointed at me.
Incorrect
You weren't here
word,
for the
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
Just a point of clarification, when you were to do, well, the way it was before, when you have we have a number of staff people in your department, as you say, who work on different programs each day, or just jump from one project to another project, which might fall under any one of these different funding categories. Does that, and I'm just not trying to lead you anywhere, I'm just curious, require the staff person to keep track of their hours on a daily basis? say I spent 6 hours working on this project, and it does not? 'Cause
We
it's
do not
like-
do that.
You do not do that, okay, good.
Getting a notional idea of where people are spending their time, even if it's not completely accurate or collected in data, is a good thing in my opinion. I'll note that in some industries this is taken to an extreme where law firms will bill their staff on a 6-minute or 12-minute increment. Well, we're not asking for anything like that. It's basically to provide a notion of where the money is allocated.
I'll provide a correction to what Mr. Grimes said. I have in the past asked for that. I came from an industry where it was common practice to record time by project or work activity. So at the minimum, I would support the Councilmember Mails and Mr. Grimes' suggestion that we should keep better track of program costs and leave it to Mr. Kenner to decide how that's best accomplished.
I think I've clearly heard the point as it relates to HCD.
And recreation.
Could I just ask more of a point of order? I understand how to put an item that has money either for or against it in the reconciliation list. But for something like this, it's not a cost one way or another. It's a preference around how we structure the budget. I don't know whether we need a decision now or not, but I'm just asking, as a procedural matter, how do we go about making votes on things like that or making changes happen? I don't know.
My sense was that there was clear sense that the city manager was getting from the council that we wanted to go that way, and that he's ready to do that. And
Yeah, no, I'm not asking-
but that kind of making sure that, say, a new city manager were to be here for next year's budget, would they know that this was the direction that things wanted to go? And so I think it could be as simple as the city manager does whatever he feels is appropriate to kind of recognize that. Maybe it's an email, maybe it's something else, maybe it's something more formal. I'd look to you for whatever works, because it's somebody who's going to be in your position who's going to have to recognize those things.
We operate by Robert's rules continuously, right? So if we were closely divided on our discussion right now is coming out both ways, we could still move a motion even though we're in a budget work session. There's nothing. We operate by Robert's rules.
We could be more formal if we needed to.
If we needed to be. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the digression.
So we're set on that?
Yes.
Thank you. And are we talking
And
about
I
just
have to-
HCD?
I have to admit, I certainly understand the HCD. I'll be honest, I don't understand the recreation one as much, obviously, because I was not here. So I just need to just understand that one a little bit more.
If you do look at the recreation budget on page 108 and 109, well, yeah, you'll see the same effect on 108 and 109, where in actual FY13, the administration hours are 2.25, and adopted FY14, they're 11.5. They're 9 FTEs higher. The same thing happened, and we have a corresponding reduction in the other programs that are, well, not quite corresponding. A community center is the one that takes the biggest hit, just looking at this. But in any case, if you look at the tables in here, you'll get an idea of how they were and how they changed.
If I may, I would like to make a couple clarifications. Part of this is that different departments represent FTEs for different divisions differently. And so in some, and like HCD has had, there's, one little tiny bit of Sarah over here and one tiny little bit of Sarah over there. And then, but other departments, the director is kind of just in administration, and then there's more direct full-times in right away or whatever the different division is. That was the situation with recreation, that they had come up with some kind of a proportion, and then it changes every single year because different of the staff help out on different, maybe they'll help out on summer camp or whatever. And so it was very difficult to try to show any kind of pattern with that and keep track of that. That was why they requested that. We still have departments that don't do it that way. And so I think, if I had to make a suggestion, I would ask the city manager, I think, to kind of look and see if there's a standard that we would follow that would make some sense. Because it's a little bit strange. And partly it's strange because, for example, with HCD, they've got about 4 different categories that are all somehow housing related. And so, 6 that are housing related. And so, but community planning is just 1. And so, there might be better ways to agglomerate some groups and split some other things up. And I don't know the answer to that, but to me, I do know that it's differs very much by department.
How about I suggest that the city manager have some conversations with council members who have particular concerns so that he can come up with the best way to do this without trying to slice and dice everything into 50 pieces and keep track of them.
I will do that.
All the same, I'd like to give one other example right this minute, which is rent stabilization, and this harkens back to the recreation discussion, where I know that and I'm not the only one, have made the argument to county council members regarding tax duplication that essentially Tacoma Park subsidizes, and I use that word intentionally, subsidizes the county so far as affordable housing is concerned. We have a disproportionate share of the county's affordable housing. We take a property tax hit on that. So does the county, because our assessments are the same as their assessments. But in proportion to the overall property tax assessed base, it's much, much smaller for the county. So we take a disproportionate hit on property taxes. So having the rent stabilization cost as close to accurate as possible by having, in this case, the personnel assigned to that cost can only help us in the tax duplication discussion with the county. So that's a very specific example that relates this to another department where we discussed it this evening.
Anything else on HCD?
Yes. Sarah, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but I get a lot of questions from residents of how do you move people from apartments to homeowners? Since we have affordable housing, rent stabilization, mortgages aren't even close to what people are paying in rent. Is there a way that we can, other than I know we do the seminar that shows people how to buy a house or whatever, is there some way that we can get or help people move from renters to homeowners? Or is that just something we just forget about?
Even I would say, I'm not sure forget about would be the way that I would characterize it. If just to highlight that shift, if you hearken back to the to my presentation on slide 17, where it sort of shows the huge dichotomy between rent from 1980 to 2010 compared to mortgage costs from 1980 to 2010.
Mortgages went flat.
And it's like, it is that.
Right.
And so, that's what you're talking about, which is a financial gap in terms of the ability to be able to support a mortgage, which has nothing to do with the down payment that would be needed to do that, the credit score that allows you to have a competitive rate mortgage to be able to purchase a home, and then the financial wherewithal to be able to maintain a home, because it's much different than an apartment, obviously, because you're responsible for such things. So I would just characterize it that way, that's a significant challenge that in my opinion, has a lot to do with the individual that's there, and we can provide some services perhaps around the edges, but there's a fundamental sort of financial challenge that I'm not sure we would be able to adequately address.
It involves structured programs on financial literacy to help people understand a lot of these calculations, which you're never going to learn until you say, oh, I know, why don't we go buy a house? And then you find out how complicated it is, just from a personal point of view of what you need to know in order to make sure it's a wise decision. Financial literacy training can help in that area. It's just a piece of the task that you're talking about.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a question of, we're offering this program, affordable housing, right? Are we saying to tenants that you should never think about buying a house in this area because most of you, your incomes will never be able to support a home here because of the types of tenants or the incomes that people are generating that are tenants in Tacoma Park. Now, for example, if you go to Silver Spring, which doesn't have affordable housing in the same way that we do it, they have similar demographics, and people do look at going from tenants to homeowners. There is that movement. So I don't know. I guess the thing is, I don't know what to tell people. People come to me and say, how do I buy a house, right? But if you have XYZ job, you're never going to buy a house, right? And there's no way I can show you how to move up the ladder, right? And then people that own homes are always asking me, why aren't we doing more for people that are tenants to be able to purchase homes?
And I think maybe part of that answer is that the first home may not be in Tacoma Park.
Or it could be a condo.
You do have the tenant opportunity to purchase law that we support and staff in large part with the assistance of the tenant capacity building folks, where if a multifamily property is made available for sale or offered to sale, the tenants occupying that structure have the first right of refusal, if you will. They can either offer to purchase it or match a third-party contract.
And how often do people use it?
A fair amount of time.
Family, and it was used on.
It's not a single-family house. It's not the family house with the big yard and the picket fence.
It is a single-family house. The first house
Yeah.
I tried to buy in Tacoma Park, I didn't get because the tenants purchased it with the contract that my wife
Right.
and I had.
Yeah, and it happened the other day. City manager received an email and, what is this? And it's the tenant opportunity to purchase. Well, it happens. We track it more with. Let me rephrase it. We invest more time in those properties that have 4 to 6 to more units in them, in terms of helping facilitate a conversation to identify a developer who will purchase it on their behalf and fund it, and they get to buy into it in a condo ownership basis at a much lower market or a much lower price than they would if it went on the open market.
And one of those that I was involved in was all of the buildings in the center of Manor Circle, where it was more than 20 units where they became homeowners.
Yeah. So there the city does a lot for that. For the single-family homeowner stuff, Councilmember Siemens, unfortunately, may be accurate in his assessment of where you might buy your first home, because prices are going up and they're not dropping in any foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. We'll take a short break.
Not me.
Okay, we're back. And we're going to do non-departmental?
General government.
General government, okay.
The general government category covers legislative, that's the city council, city manager, finance, information systems, human resources, and city clerk offices. Also covers the costs for legal services and contractual expenses for many of the activities of the city. And it's not an exciting budget. The revenue is about the same.
Challenge.
No, please don't make it more exciting. It's just fine. It's just fine. I like it, just like this. Our expenditures barely changed. There is a proposal, as has been mentioned, for a half-time FTE for the finance department to provide administrative clerk assistance for that department. There's also a 0.05 increase in the city clerk's office to basically bring a half-time position to a benefited half-time position. The capital budget associated with general government goes down a small amount. And we'll go through that. There's very little change in the cost for city council, with the exception of an increase in the fringe benefits due to simply the selection of health insurance choices by the council members. There's a reduction in the city manager's budget that's primarily related to the differences in contractual costs that we had for various things. And the major thing we still have money in for, although it's a little bit less as a group, has to do with the review of the Washington Adventist Hospital Certificate of Need contract that we have with Nancy Lane and the financial review. There would also be legal costs related to that that's reflected in the legal budget. The finance department would show the increase in expenditures, and that has to do with the proposal to increase by a half-time position an accounting assistant. There is an increase in the legal budget by 9% projected, and this is to accommodate some things that we expect to happen. There's the Washington Adventist Hospital continued review. We are in union negotiations that are likely to continue until into FY15. Tends to be how that goes, especially because our compensation study will not be completed during this fiscal year. It will continue into next fiscal year, and how we implement that will take some time and does have some legal work related to that, especially as we negotiate that with our unions. We do have two unions, one that represents police staff and one that represents kind of general government staff. For the Information Systems Division, there's not an increase in expenditures. There's a good amount of work plan items and that have to do with implementing the new financial software system, continuing the IT assessment and a strategic plan for IT. The capital item is the data center build-out that has been talked about. In the Human Resources Department, a small increase in expenditures. The major effort will be kind of working on the compensation study and seeing that completion in FY15. And in the City Clerk's Division, again, a small increase in expenditures with the emphasis on continued digitization of records. And that is all that we have on these slides. I don't think it's very exciting, but I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I bet Jesse's excited to get a half-time person.
No, she gets.
Anna just pumped her fist, yes.
Yeah.
She's very excited.
I haven't seen her that animated and ever.
We all know that keeping Ms. Brooks happy is one of the best things for this city government.
Right.
We do appreciate the work that she does and her staff really contribute a lot, but the assistant would be very useful in that department.
Councilor Romeo, you had something?
Yeah, and then I'm not trying to make this exciting.
That's fine.
We 2 years ago maybe, we moved from having a very detailed document that provided an update on all the legal case work we had going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we, as a council, decided to not do that anymore. I think because it was a level of detail we thought was unnecessary. Maybe it was before your time.
I apologize. Was that provided by the city attorney's office or by the city?
City attorney.
The city attorney's office, yes.
And I guess I've just found myself with too little information now. So I feel like we haven't, like Mama Bear, Papa Bear, we haven't quite got it right. And I don't know if other council members share that, but I just bring this up in the context of talking about the legal budget, because I'd like some different version of reporting that's not as little as we have now.
My recollection was that we had a specific time when we got a session with the city attorney to specifically discuss that. It wasn't that we weren't going to get it, it was that we weren't going to do that specific session. I think the report is still generated and we can still get it.
Okay.
I think the level of the reporting, though, changed significantly because we were getting monthly invoices with detailed reporting. And
You can still get those. I get them, I sign off on them. If you want them, you got them.
Okay, great. Problem solved.
We're happy to share the information.
Yeah,
But
I'd love to get those.
there's a difference between the invoices, which really just an invoice, as opposed to those sort of periodic reports on semi-annual reports, I think.
I mean, what I'm speaking about is, such and such a case is active, it's in the following stage.
About the
and-
cases, suits.
And that
That is
information,
different.
that information, though, is still presented at least annually, right?
Yes, yes.
But
Okay.
I haven't seen it. Now that it's brought up, I'm trying to remember the last time we even saw anything like that.
We'll work to make sure that we find an answer for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And do you still want the monthly invoice? Because that gives you a marker about what's being worked on.
Just share one with me, so I can just refamiliarize myself with the format.
Sure.
And you want the full detail, or do you want the summary?
Full detail.
Okay.
Go for it. Thank you.
We'll distribute one to everybody, and you see what you want.
Thanks.
Should I go on to non-departmental? or-
Please do.
Yeah. This isn't a hugely crucial thing, but under legislative, it would be good to see a line item breakout for the lobbying.
You'd like to see a line item breakout of lobbying?
Yes. Because that's fundamentally different from the council costs.
Is that under services and charges, or what?
Presumably.
The amount, I believe, that we spend on it is about $32,000, but we will be going out for updating the request for proposals and this year, because it's been 5 years with the firm.
Oh, okay.
And so that would show up in which page? Like 39,
40.
40?
Well, 39.
40?
Bottom
Yeah.
item on 40.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering about where it would show up as a line item.
We have contractual lobbying for $40,000. That the contract with Public Policy Partners
that
is
is there,
more like
then.
$32,000, but we have some additional in case there's some particular extra effort that we need to have made.
Right, so it is there, it's just not in the table.
That's correct.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, we're all set on general government, moving to non-departmental?
Play some tennis. I like that picture. Probably, I may call on some assistance here, but for our non-departmental budget, this is where the city pays our insurance, liability and property insurance coverage. We pay workers' compensation. We do employment training, employee trainings, and the citywide grant program comes out of the non-departmental budget. The increase of about 10% is mostly due to workers' compensation and insurance premium increases. We have a small increase in tuition reimbursement. There's been more interest by our employees in the tuition reimbursement program. So the non-departmental budget it does have a large personnel component, but it's not tied to specific departments. So the workers' compensation coverage increased 8% from FY14 to 15, which is much less than the previous increase of 42%. Nevertheless, the $610,000 is a lot of money. It's something that we work very hard to try to keep under control. We have staff trainings. Part of the staff trainings are to bring the workers' compensation under control. And we have the tuition reimbursement program. Other items in non-departmental, one of the things that we do that helps make Tacoma Park affordable is the state homeowner property tax credit. Approximately 165 residents benefit from this. If they have qualified for the state program, we give a supplement to that, and it's quite generous.
And as we went through a period of time where we increased how we did that, and I think we kind of maxed out at what we can do, and is that where we are?
We've maxed out, and in fact, many of the people, not many, but a number of the folks on the list don't even get as much as maybe it computes to because then they'd actually be getting a rebate back. You know, we get their tax down to zero in some cases. So the tax credit's very useful for the folks who qualify.
If I can just point out to my colleagues that it started out that I think we maybe started at like 15% level of what we could do to piggyback on the state
And
system.
then we went up to 50.
And then 50, and then we went to 100, and it's been at 100 for a couple of years.
Right.
So even if we wanted to do more in that, we got nowhere else to go.
That's right. I will note that it's going to be interesting. The proposal in the county is for just about all property owners to get like a $600 kind of rebate in addition to the tax credit things, and it does not income qualify. So there at least is a proposal. We'll see if the county council upholds it in their review.
And that's a format that Rockfield used at one point.
Yeah, they did it differently though. This is something else, I think. But in any event, that will be something that people in Tacoma Park, as the rest of Montgomery County, should be seeing on their tax bills.
Just to Councilmember Mail's point, it wasn't that many years ago when the county tax rate and the city tax rate were almost identical. And now the county tax rate is almost double the city tax rate.
That's right. We have insurance costs. We also have our general contingency. It's a charter-required general contingency. It's a relatively small amount of money, $108,000. We tend to, sometimes if there's a budget amendment for which another account isn't appropriate, it may come from this amount. The Independence Day Committee, the Folk Festival, and the whole community grant program that's been discussed with Council comes under this account. And I think that's it for non-departmental.
Couple of questions. The 1.5% of revenues, you realize it's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things, but we have this balance in the general fund that we draw on or add to as our situation changes from fiscal year to fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
How is the contingency account different from how we use the general fund reserve?
Ms. Brooks, would you like to answer that?
I mean, I guess the question I'm getting to is why do we need a general contingency account if we've got $8 million in our general fund
Because
reserve?
it's in the charter or the code.
It's in the code, and I guess we didn't have that much money in the past. It seemed like in the past that there were times that we didn't even have an unassigned fund balance. And the money that we did have was basically for specific purposes. But as Suzanne had said, basically, when we do budget amendments and some things come up that we didn't anticipate, that's a place that we can take money from. It's not a lot of money, but, you know, I guess the charter is basically providing for things that are unforeseen to provide some source of money, assume that it's not, you know, a material amount.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not a material amount, it's probably not worth changing the charter.
That's kind of why we haven't done anything.
Okay.
I was going to say, if you have an issue with it, it would take a, you know, charter amendment to,
No, I know, and I
to
don't.
resolve
I
it.
don't have an issue with it.
But every time the revenues change, that amount will change. So
Yeah, I
during the budget
understand.
reconciliation, that either goes up or down based on whatever happens.
All right.
And that's one of those ripple-through effects that can drive a finance director slightly over the edge when last-minute tweaks happen to the budget.
Yeah, because I have to always remember to go back and adjust that number too.
I mean, I would think just a more sensible approach would be to have the charter say that there must be a contingency fund maintained, and that the council shall every 5 years decide what the percent shall be. Because then you would set it. Then you would do it by matter of policy. You'd say, okay, for the next 5 years, we're going to set it at 3%, 2%, 0.5%, and then but you wouldn't actually put the number in. So you could still plan for it over time. You could set the level of fiscal prudence, and it would actually be a meaningful amount instead of a trivial amount that is for extra stuff. Just one more specific question that I wanted to ask on this. So does this balance get drawn down every year and then put back in the next year? Is there a growing balance in the fund? How does this?
In which fund?
I'm sorry, the contingency fund.
The contingency basically, I think we started out with about $100,000, and we've used during this fiscal year so far, about 40 of that.
Is it, so in either the audit or in?
It doesn't accumulate over.
It doesn't.
It goes away and
It
comes
goes
back
to
to
zero,
next
and then
year.
it comes back.
Okay, thank you.
So
That's what I was-
all appropriations lapse at the end of the year, and you have to reappropriate.
Great.
But a lot of times, we don't use up the whole amount in the contingency fund. But, you know,
So
it
just-
comes in handy when, you know, some things happen that you didn't anticipate. There is some funds that can be transferred out of the contingency budget into wherever the money needs to be spent.
If I'm not mistaken, it tends to be the money that we kind of say, well, let's try and wait until January to think about it, so that we're not pulling all that out early in the fiscal year, and then if we need to do something, that's where we go, and then we get the remaining balance in it, so we know what we've got.
But I think, to Councilmember Mail's point, I mean, I think that the way that we have been looking at how much money we need for the normal fluctuations of a year, plus what we anticipate, you know, is an appropriate contingency amount, you know, is the more substantive discussion every year.
It's more than $100,000.
It's more than 100,000. Are there any other non-departmental questions?
Just a question about workers' comp. I see that you have no choice but to make I hope for a projection that the number of workers' comp insurance claims will go down. But we have no control over that, because that all depends on injuries on the job. Do we have a plan or an effort to try to minimize situations where, just to avoid those claims, not as just simply through safety programs and that sort of.
Yes, and if we've had Ms. Blackwell sitting here the whole evening, and she's a great person to answer, but she oversees our safety committee, which is a new committee. And I'll have her answer just to give a few examples of it. But there's been really a terrific emphasis on a systematic way to make our staff more safe,
Right.
and to, when there's something that's wrong, that it gets addressed more quickly.
Moreover, I would say that you know, the identification of the safety committee and some of the programs that we have, we document to our workers' comp insurance provider, and that is helpful to them in terms of the rates that we are quoted
Keeps
from
our
them,
premium down.
and hopefully reduces them if they see our efforts to try to minimize.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned is that it's just ends up being such a
Big number.
big hit on the premiums.
A couple of things. Good evening. A couple of things that we're doing with the safety committee. Right now, we are actually working on really developing a true safety plan for all of the city employees. It will include training, a lot more awareness. It may include things like toolbox talks, where you cover stretching or proper lifting and things like that. So that we are addressing the specific issues that we are encountering. Because we have a police department, and unfortunately, just as an example, if an officer is trying to make an arrest and whoever is arresting them tries to attack them, these are things that we're not able really to control.
Right.
And they do tend to be very expensive claims.
Yeah.
But I would say the majority, and take that as you know, with a grain of salt, but the majority of the incidents that we do have occurring here are things that are preventable. So as long as we're working on reducing the number of claims, increasing awareness, and then reducing the severity of the claims, we will be able to get our workers' comp costs down.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your question? fully?
Yeah, it does. And I suppose people who study these things, and I'm not wanting to get into it now, can compare municipalities and similar municipalities and benchmark how they're doing relative to the norms.
Right. Actually, I attended a meeting last week with Chesapeake Insurance, the formerly injured workers insurance fund, where there are several other municipalities that participate. And I believe that within this group, we're going to start looking at one another's injury rates and really developing some best practices.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Then we'll just move real quickly to the CIP. I asked the city manager to just do a quick run-through on this, because I think there are some things that got covered in departmental budget discussions, but there were some things that did not. So we might want to just make sure that we
I'd like just like to highlight a few things. So if you go to, starting on page 176, is where the capital outlays tab begins. This obviously is our 2015 through 2019 projected capital improvement program. Obviously, the items that we're mostly concerned with and that we've discussed through most of the departments is the fiscal year 15 line, so that's where I'd like to sort of focus. I just want to highlight especially some of the larger expenditures that we anticipate in fiscal year 15, as well as just some of the more particular programmatic things. Just to remind you, the first one obviously is police cars, which is the first item there, $175,000. It was a conscious decision to reduce that amount of money that was coming out of the equipment replacement reserve for fiscal year 15 to try to reduce some of our expenditures, and so we came down a little bit on the amount of car replacements from the equipment replacement reserve that we anticipate in fiscal year 15. As you can see, it's a little bit higher. It stays higher in 16, 17, 18, 19, and honestly, I think that will be something we can decide next year, sort of how much money we have available to make some of those purchases. Going on to the next page, sort of down at the bottom, where you see $200,000 for the government services financial software. We talked a little bit about that in one of the roundtables from the information services department. That's just a continuation of the financial services software that we've been reviewing. Again, we have a financial services software platform that is 14 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old, and we're looking for some new functionality, and we're hopeful that that price even will be a little bit less. If I set up that we will not come in at $200,000, that will be less than $200,000.
And there wouldn't be any sort of staff training costs associated with that would have shown up elsewhere in the budget?
It comes with that's part of the package.
So there should be no additional cost for us to have to do staff training. Continuing on, page 178. As you can see, this is where we've got lots of our streets and sidewalk work. We've got $400,000 for street rehab, which Public Works Director talked a little bit about. We've got $250,000 that we anticipate for the Flower Avenue Green Street project. Just because of some of the timing elements, we don't necessarily anticipate utilizing any of our TAP funds, but obviously because that's grant money that we have now been awarded, if we have any need to utilize those funds for Flower Avenue, we will certainly do so in fiscal year 15. We've got sort of an equal split right below that, $500,000 and $500,000 for ADA sidewalk retrofits as well as new sidewalk constructions in fiscal year 15, and we're anticipating roughly $230,000 worth of Ethan Allen Gateway streetscape. Just goes without mention probably that for Flower Avenue and Ethan Allen, lots of those numbers are really guesses dependent upon where we are in the program in those projects in fiscal year 15, so those numbers may change.
Since we're on it, so the ADA sidewalk retrofit would be completed in FY18, and there would be no anticipated expenditures after that?
That's what we're looking at in terms of the existing list. Mm-hmm. What I don't know the answer to, but I think it does not include sidewalks along state highways. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the discussion that continues to come up about to what extent we may end up doing some of the work along state highways. But this is to complete the identification, all the identified spots.
Continuing on, just at the bottom of the page, while it's not necessarily a large dollar amount, but you see the Sligo Mill, Overlook Park, and Colby Park playground projects, which we have just highlighted a little bit when we had some discussions previously on those two park projects in particular. Continuing on page 179, we've got dog park funds, again, anticipated for fiscal year 15. And then further on down that page on 179, we've got $85,000 for the police space review, and we've got $50,000 for the library design. Yes, $50,000 for the library design. Again, those are our needs and planning assessments to get a better idea about potential renovation options. You also see we've got some money that could potentially be identified for the library ILS system, which again was noted in the visioning project that we had.
Brian. So the police space renovations atrium, Councilmember Siemens has been pushing, if I'm understanding this particular item, for quite a while. This is the creation of a floor out here, or not?
It's not. It is a design to decide, kind of to give us some options about what to do. One option is not to fill in the floor, but simply to change the walls of the dispatch area. There's also options to either fully or partially fill that in.
Yeah, it's clear that $85,000 isn't going to pay for any.
This
kind
is
of
just
work
design,
like that,
conceptual design type work.
So but what I'm really focused on is the $500,000 for FY16.
Yeah, so we have made an attempt, and the valuable thing about funding most of our capital improvement program items not with debt or other bond proceeds, we're really funding that with operating money, is we'll be able to make a decision in fiscal year 16 around, hopefully dependent upon the options that we get for police space and library, what we actually want to move forward with. It's a guess that we might want to move forward with something in fiscal year 16. To be perfectly honest, given some of our previous discussions, we're going to have to really think about whether we can afford to do that, because we're not proposing to borrow money that would be existing operating funds that we'd be using for that.
So this is a possible number rather than one that is implicated by current needs.
Exactly.
That's correct. Most CIP numbers are in out years are very optional. There's only every once in a while there's something where that if you do part A, you have to do part B, and that's not certainly the case here.
In some cases, it's clearer than others. Yeah, I hope I don't get any angry emails if I pick on public art. Yeah, sure, you decide you're not going to fund it one particular year. In other cases, it's not so clear.
I would like to emphasize that I do hope to see an option in there of filling in the atrium, because it is not just about police space, it's also about recreational space too.
Continuing on page 180, just again talks about some of the expenditures that the Public Works Director talked about from the Stormwater Management Fund, in particular some of the Flower Avenue bioretention projects that we anticipate hopefully being able to move forward with in fiscal year 15. On page 180, we just have a summary of those capital improvement items that are funded from the various accounts. So you have the amount that's funded from the equipment replacement reserve, maintenance reserve, facility maintenance reserve, those that are funded from the general fund, stormwater, speed camera, and so forth. So it just gives you a summary. And again, we were fairly mindful of those expenditure amounts in fiscal year 15. If I'm not mistaken, I think if I go back to our presentation, I'm pretty sure that number for fiscal year 15 is a reduction from fiscal year 14.
And one thing that I think was significant was not contributing funds to the facility maintenance reserve, but instead using some of those funds for some of these needs.
I'll have to find that.
And I've got a couple of quick questions on things in here. One of them on page 176, the last item, a hot box. I have a sense that I might know what that is, but I'm wondering.
Only my public works director over here.
Well, I'm thinking it's something to do with
I think it's with paving.
pavement fixing.
It keeps the asphalt hot while you're using,
That's what I
while you're
thought.
doing the patching.
And on page 178, where you pointed out the street rehab, and it's 400,000 this year and 500,000 in the out years. My sense was we were usually going for 500. Is this year 400 because of all of these other line items in here that have to do with streets? Or
I think this also came into play because we have WSSC money and some other kinds of things that may come into play with this.
Okay. And there was brief talk about whether the ADA retrofits in the out years and whether it gets to the state highway stuff, and it reminded me of the miserable condition of Carroll Avenue in Old Town.
I communicated with the Public Works Director about a week or so, and she was checking into some of that stuff around a manhole, around one of the previous patches that was done. The patch is subsiding to be a real bad situation. There's also a filled-in trench along Carroll Avenue. So she said she was looking into all that kind of stuff and hasn't gotten back to me about it.
Basically a large section where it was kind of pumping, and then I noticed today some sidewalk and curb that was dangerous.
Okay.
And so
If you can identify the exact location.
If that's work that State Highway should be coming in and doing, or whether that, in particular, that sidewalk work, whether it's something where they would say, well, no, we put it in, you're supposed to maintain the sidewalks along State Highway, then it would be something that we would have to address.
We'll have to have Public Works look at that.
Okay.
So you want a more of an answer afterward?
Comment is that when Ms. Daines was talking to us about the New Hampshire corridor study, where is it here? I just had it.
Should be the second item.
Market study along New Hampshire Avenue, 40,000. I thought she said that was in the capital budget.
That is not in the capital budget.
No.
That's being funded from operating money.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we have any studies that are in our capital budget.
It would be, the earliest you would have is like actual design work.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But stuff
Correct.
prior to that would not
be in our capital budget.
I have a couple of questions. First, I appreciate the balancing of the ADA work with the new sidewalk work, 500 and 500. Thank you. The assistant city manager, got a comment that I was going to make in advance, which is the sidewalk along Carroll, along the state highway, between Ward 5 and Ward 2. I would encourage us to put a place mark in the 2016 budget for something like that. But even better, I would encourage us to try to get SHA to pay for that sidewalk being redone during the context of their Carroll Bridge project. They're already planning to install, I believe, a new sidewalk on the south and east side of the bridge, which currently is just a grassy area, so there's a break in the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
So they're planning to put a new sidewalk. It's a new sidewalk in there, but that's an extension of service. And then from the bridge all the way up to essentially the college, at least on the east side, but I know in some patches on the west side, the sidewalk has got some serious problems.
That's right.
It's a fantastic time to do the sidewalk in what is a dangerous place for a crew to work, because presumably there'll be a lot less traffic using that
Right.
strip of
No,
road.
I absolutely think that's essential.
And I think we could, if we need to use our connections to try to get encouragement from the state level to have them do something like that as part of this project, we should absolutely try to do that. And we can put off the conversation about who really has to maintain it for the next 20 years and just say this is another special one-off. The couple of other comments, the replacement of an emergency generator, which I'm assuming is the one in the back of the building.
Which page are you on?
179, $43,000 for an emergency generator. Just a personal aside, when I live close to the city building and the once per month testing of that happened on Sunday mornings at 7 a.m., it was a significant noise, and particularly the alarm going off and then the generator. So, buying a replacement that is a low noise generator would be one thing, but also clean diesel, sort of the environmental aspects of that purchase could be important too. And then my last comment is that in 2016, there's 2017, there's on the page 180, there's the Sligo Mill trash interceptor for $150,000. And if I'm thinking of the part of the stream that would go to in Ward 3, there's significant water contamination in that space as well in terms of oil slicks and extreme discoloration. And it might be the sort of thing that would be a project that one would want to preface with some additional testing through the Center for Watershed Protection contract that we use or something, so that if we're taking the trash out, in other words, why don't we just make sure there's not other needs there as well? So it's not a particular cost, but it's some prep work for that project. Councilmember Grimes?
No, I was just wondering, isn't this the kind of thing that there's often state remediation money available?
Yes, and in fact, I was going to mention that we have been pursuing and have tried for some time to get grant funds for something like this, for this project. And we've had a little bit of difficulty with that. We can have Ms. Braithwaite describe what we've gone for on that. But to me, it is exactly an appropriate project for grant funding.
And if we can help with that, let us know.
Sure.
Because it would be a beautiful park area
right.
with some restoration work.
Maybe you can use some of your mojo with Anthony Brown.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay.
Can I
Go ahead.
ask one question? I wanted to just address the city manager with regard to the question of borrowing for capital of projects. In recent years, we decided to pay off some of the long-term debt ahead of time in the interest of saving interest. Whether that was the right thing to do or not at the time, I wasn't always sure, but that seemed to be the way we wanted to go. So now our total debt burden is relatively minuscule as things go with local governments, which and if we have concerns, and I'm not sure that we do, about future revenues balancing future expenses, it would seem to me that a lot of these capital items that we're putting here and saying they're coming out of the general fund could just as easily be grouped together and funded through a state bond, the one that we've always used with the state. And just because some of these projects are, you want to match up long-term borrowing with long-term assets. You don't want to use long-term borrowing on temporary short-term assets. That's sort of a rule of thumb, as you know. And I just want to find out where you are with regard to that possibility.
Two comments about that. With the help of the finance director and the deputy city manager, we went through sort of an analysis of borrowing capacity earlier in the fiscal year. We had a representative from the state, who I can never remember his name, Charlie Day, come and talk to us about some of the borrowing options that the state has in terms of programs. So we went through sort of a two-way analysis of what do we think our total borrowing capacity would be for the city, making some rational assumptions about revenue and expenditures and so forth, balanced against sort of the minimal amount of debt that would make sense for us to borrow. So as you probably know, there are certain sunk financing costs in terms of underwriting any kind of debt that we incur. And so it only makes sense to borrow above a certain amount of money. It doesn't make sense, as an example, to borrow $500,000 because you're going to be paying a lot in fees and sunk costs. And so we sort of had to look at what amount of debt we think we might particularly need. So we went through that analysis, and so we've thought a little bit about that. I will sort of the second point, and the mayor asked me to put together just something which I can send out to the rest of the council, which is, as a small municipality, we have some unique challenges as it relates to borrowing. Partially, it's because many of the needs, and you can see this in our capital improvement program, don't rise to a significant level. We need 200,000, 500,000. We rarely need $1 million in one hit unless we're going to be renovating, the second phase of Public Works or something like that. And so we tend to not have single projects unless you're talking about the community center or something like that, that makes it feasible theoretically for us to want to borrow. What that produces is exactly what you said, which is that we're funding long-term debt types of things with really short-term money. And I would love to be able to position the city where we're funding longer-term expenses with longer-term borrowing, but we need a sizable enough project to be able to do something like that. So I would love to talk to the state or someone else more about some thoughts that I have around a concept for smaller municipalities to aggregate some of our borrowing needs and to sort of be pre-approved at a certain underwriting amount and then only draw down on those funds when we need them. So we don't incur all of the borrowing costs in 1 year, but we can spread the financing costs over multiple projects. That's just a twinkle in my eye today. I don't have any support on it.
And it's gone beyond the twinkle in that the city manager and I talked about it a bit. I asked him to write up some things. I took that with me yesterday when I had a meeting and lunch with John Laria, who's the chair of the Sustainable Growth Commission that I serve on. He was at MML, and we were talking with planners across the state about their response to a letter from the governor and the lieutenant governor to our commission asking for advice on what would be helpful in moving along infill and redevelopment projects in the state, in particular in municipalities. And I provided the information that the city manager gave me to Mr. Laria, who's in the process of helping our commission come up with recommendations to the governor and the lieutenant governor, with the idea that they will be something that can have legs in the new administration, whoever that may be. And he was very interested in that and said that he was going to contact the city manager to talk about that some more.
Okay. It does seem to me when you look at street work, rehab, and paving, and upgrades and all that, that you could consolidate all that and come up with a couple $1 million.
That's exactly right.
The city did borrow $2 million back in 2005 or so to play catch-up on street repairs. I oppose that, and as a matter of general principle, I oppose exactly what we're talking about right now. I oppose borrowing money to pay for routine expenses.
I'm not sure anybody's talking about routine expenses in all cases here. I think there's some
sure. We spend $100,000 here, $50,000 there. We're talking about aggregating these expenses. These are things that I believe should be paid for out of current revenues.
Just to be clear, I mean, at least when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking of long-term expenditures, and I guess it just depends on how you characterize those kinds of costs.
I'm including assets that have a lifetime value that exceeds a few years. That might be 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I'm including those things.
Well, there could be a difference of opinion.
There is.
And let's just proceed like you were talking to these people and see where it goes.
Seeing if there's any capacity to do that, right, if we were to decide to do it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
All right. Can the new sidewalk design construction and any of the ADA improvement projects, is Flower Avenue a part of that, or is that all, any sidewalk work on Flower Avenue would be separate?
I would have to ask our Public Works Director, because I know we're mixed up on not mixed up, but we're trying to coordinate with WSSC around their replacement of stuff, and so trying to make sure that we don't do something and then they come and rip up the street again. And so I know that extends to sidewalks as well, so I don't know where that line ends.
Yeah, I think that most of those funds are not geared towards Flower Avenue. Okay. There may be some specific intersections and things where it might cross, but I think that that's one area where we've got the list of projects already for new sidewalks and for ADA improvements that are a separate list.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so we're finished with CIP. I think Councilmember Siemens has a couple things that he wants to say about last week since he wasn't here.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize that I had a schedule conflict that didn't let me attend the meeting last week, but I did get a chance to watch the replays, and I'm satisfied with everything except one item that I did want to talk about. But I'd like to preface my comments. It's regarding the police department, and just preface it by reminding everyone that our city manager, Mr. Kenner, has been here for a very brief amount of time, and Mr. Goldberg, who's chief of the police department, has been here also for a short amount of time, just taking that position right before our previous city manager had left. So I don't want to be accused of using excessive force in my discussion. But what I want to talk about are the vacancies in the police department. And I would just like to emphasize to Mr. Kenner that the council and community really has set an expectation of 42 officers on our police force, and I think that that expectation kind of gives you a responsibility that we have a fully staffed police force. If we were expecting to have fewer officers, then we could budget for fewer officers. And now, I understand that there are complications when officers leave, and it's difficult to find other people to fill those positions. But looking forward, right, I'm hopeful that that we don't get to each budget year and hear excuses of why we are not fully staffed to the greatest extent possible. And that you do come to this council with a clear statement of resource requirements so that we can stay as close to fully staffed as possible, that we meet the expectations of the community. And I want to emphasize that now so that we aren't surprised next year. Thank you.
Okay, then our final item this evening is identification of additional reconciliation items. We have a list started. We want to try and make sure that the staff has time to adequately research anything, come up with written stuff for us to consider so that as we get to the reconciliation list, we have full information on what we need as we consider all of them as a group. So do people have other ones?
Mayor, I would like to add one item at this time. It's the Lunch and Learn program. We can't have it at Essex House this year. We're going to have to do it at Washington Adventist University. Staff from Washington Adventist University will be at council on Monday to describe the program. It's mostly the money would be used for busing the kids from Essex House and from Parkview Towers, since those buildings are next door to one another. The university is providing money through a grant that they have for other programming, so I just want to, blend Lunch and Learn with their program, and they're going to provide the rooms for the programs.
What was the price tag?
It's probably going to be around $10,000.
And this is just for busing for...
Busing, gas, and
I just want to make sure I understand there. You're talking about busing them a couple of blocks?
yes. I can't have them walk because the bridge at Maple and Sligo Creek Parkway is under construction. So the only way that they could get there is they have to cut into the park and then cut back into up the hospital driveway because they can't walk on the street. So, yes, to pick them up, that's what we're estimating.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. And I apologize to my colleagues. I'm going to leave as soon as I finish speaking, not because I don't want to hear what you have to say, but because I have to go pick up my son. A couple things. You heard me speak last week about my preference with regard to sustainability would be to set up a sustainability fund to hold on to the money from this year and have it carry over next year. At one point, I think the city manager referred to a expected balance at the end of this year and sustainability of somewhere north of $100,000. But as a placeholder in the FY15 budget, I would propose putting an additional $70,000 in what's called programming implementation for the new sustainability coordinator to use for the programs that are identified in the Brendel report. So we currently have $30,000 for that function, and I would propose increasing that. And this is a suggestion that came to me from some of the people on the Committee on the Environment, but I fully support. And the idea is that you want this, new position that we've been sort of getting excited about for going on 3 years now, to actually have some money to implement particularly some energy-focused programs. So it would be.
Sorry, you said that was 70 or 75?
70. And there's already 30 in there, so the idea would be it's 100 available. The second item would be a $35,000 reduction for the mobile web upgrades. If I were making a choice, I would rather have us focus on the quality of our existing website first. So my proposal could be amended to be $35,000 of an additional investment in improving the content, improving the usability of our current website. But rather than jumping to mobile, I would focus on. I would not do that now. I would focus on our current website or half a dozen other things. I'd like to propose we put aside money for acquisition of additional parkland. We've talked about this a few times in the last year or 2 years. My understanding is that the Committee on the Environment is also, one of the members of the Committee on the Environment is putting together some sort of revision of an open space plan. The last open space plan, I think, dates from the 1980s. And so we'll have a plan we've identified. We've talked before about a couple of different properties in the city, including the back of the McLaughlin School, which is currently wooded. So I'd propose setting aside $200,000 for parkland acquisition with no particular identification of a space for that to occur. That's it. Thank you.
Other reconciliation items. Councilmember-elect Stewart.
The first is either a study or an evaluation of what is now Orchard Alley, which is a paper street off of Orchard near Sligo Mill Road. The issue there is that trucks come in off of New Hampshire onto Sheridan to the warehouses there, but unfortunately, given the traffic pattern, many times the trucks need to then go into the accompanying neighborhood. And so residents there have identified this alley that's already existed, Orchard Alley, that could be continued up and connected to Sheridan to make it easier for trucks to exit the neighborhood. The reason that this becomes also an issue is the development of the Sligo Mill playground that is going to be there. So if we have increased traffic of children in the area, helping to alleviate some of the truck traffic there. So I'd like to ask that we consider some money put in for a study to see if that's feasible in this budget. The next piece is related to some of the crime issues that have been discussed. I actually had the opportunity this afternoon to meet with the chief to talk about a number of ideas, and was happy to hear that he's already moving forward on a number of things that have been brought up in the town hall meeting. But one area I'd like to explore is improved communications with residents of the city. This would be more tailored communication to neighborhoods where instances have happened, and potentially not just communicating with residents by email, because not all our residents are have email or can access information that way. And I've just begun conversations this afternoon with the chief about where that could take us. Different trainings, when we're hiring the new community coordinator, what that person would look like and the skills they would bring to the position.
Okay.
Was there a dollar amount associated with that?
Not yet, no. I don't have one.
Other reconciliation items? Okay, and if anybody comes up with anything else in the intervening time before our next meeting, be sure to communicate those and communicate those both to get them on the list and to get information from staff as required.
Mayor, I'd just like to ask, so similar to how we have done from the first budget work session, we've provided some answers to some questions. I believe the city clerk, we will be posting that document to our website. It was sent to you all, I hope, today, right? Did I send it? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank God. We will similarly, from this budget work session, put together some answers and provide that and post that on the website. But effectively, from I think staff's perspective, we've sort of hopefully provided an overview of the budget and given some individual attention to each of our departments. I know that there's a tentative work session that's on the list for Thursday, and I was just trying to get a sense about, especially from staff's perspective, what is the expectation that we have completed all of our budget work session related items and we should just be looking forward to reconciliation, or just trying to get a sense from the council on that?
Typically, what I have seen in the past is that items of significant change to the budget would have been itemized on the reconciliation budget. And so it looks like you've come through pretty unscathed, that the budget's moving forward well. And I give great credit to you and your staff for the documentation that you put together this year and the well thought out plan. So I think leave it to the mayor, but I'm guessing that it's really these reconciliation items are what remains to be finalized.
And my sense is that we could do those in regular meetings on Mondays, and therefore we don't need to hold that spot next Thursday as a separate budget meeting.
You already have a tentative reconciliation on the 28th.
Right.
And I would think that with the list as short as it is, that
And
we
we
could
can,
do that in one meeting.
we can, if we need to, we can do something, clarification or anything else on the 21st and deal with reconciliation on the 25th, and that way we're ready to go forward. 28th, not 25th.
Right.
28th.
28th.
I caught that myself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Unless you want to do, like Christmas, 25th. Okay, so I think we're all set and we're adjourned.
Children Registration's already underway for Tacoma Park Recreation Department Summer Camp. Find a great camp for your teen, tot, or youth.
They get to meet like new kids every day.
Visit us on
from the show and it's 2 a.m. Moon through the curtain caresses your skin, and I know you work so hard today.
Council will stand in session. Roll call, please.
I'm not here asking.
A member of my family was killed with a gun. It can happen, and it does, and it was an accident.
I implore you to vote against these fares and cutting services.
Aye passes 5-2.
Oh, happen in a day. We'll make sure you don't miss a thing.
And your sleep is precious in every way. So I slowly slip into the bed and try to match the rhythm of your breath. Oh, my darling, sweet darling of mine, you're the beautiful music in my heart and mind. So my darling, sleep soundly, sleep deep, and I will meet you in dreamland, my sweet. Driving home tonight through the rain. Sometimes I feel a little bit afraid that something could take me from you. Then I'd be flying through the universe with no one to hold on to. So I turn on the radio while I drive, but the music, it just makes me cry. Oh, my darling, sweet darling of mine, you're the beautiful music in my heart and mind. So my darling, sleep soundly, sleep deep, and I will meet you in dreamland, my sweet. My with steel. Some work with numbers, some others work to heal. Me, I work with my voice and these strings, and words in a notebook trying to take wing. So may they fly to you through the starry sky, landing softly in your heart tonight. Oh, my darling, sweet darling of mine. You're the beautiful music in my heart and mind. So my darling, sleep soundly, sleep deep, and I will meet you in dreamland, my sweet.
Registration's already underway for Tacoma Park Recreation Department Summer Camp. Find a great camp for your teen, tot, or youth.
They get to meet like new kids every day.
Visit us online for a full listing.
Mazel is something that you get when you walk out in the street and you don't get run over by a car, then you have mazel.
And to add to what my dear wife just said, there's a saying, Menda.
Council will stand in session. Roll call, please.
I'm not here asking you to stop growth.
A member of my family was killed with a gun. It can happen, and it does, and it was an
For you
accident.
to vote against these fares and cutting services.
Aye passes 5-2.
A lot can happen in a day. We'll make sure you don't miss a thing.
Obenabiso mazel, and mazel means good luck. And with a little mazel, you'll always have a buck.
Hey, Mr. Hip Flip, how did you get so flippin' hip? Hey, Mr. Hip Flip, how did you get so flippin' hip? Was it something in the water? Was it something that they put in the chip dip? hip flip. Look so fine in those leopard slacks. Hey, Mr. Hip Flip. You're always styling to the max. Is there something in your jeans, baby? You know what I mean. Just want the facts, Jack. Hippie, hippie, flip, hippie, hippie, flip, hippie, hippie, flip, flip. Now a friend of a friend who was sleeping with a friend of a friend of a friend who was sleeping with a friend of Mr. Hip Flip. Said I can take you to a party, we can go backstage. It's a brand new show, it's all the rage and it's starring Mr. Hip Flip. So I arrived at the show like a VIP. Not a has been, a was been, or someday will be like Mr. Hip Flip. When I went backstage, I took a deep breath. To tell you the truth, I was scared to death of meeting my idol, Mr. Hip Flip. So I said to myself, hey, Rach, this is it. But when I saw Mr. Hip Flip, when I saw Mr. Hip Flip, when I saw Mr. Hip Flip, he wasn't very hip. Hey, Mr. Hip Flip, what is it exactly that you do? Mr. Hip Flip, you get paid just for being you. And you say the clever things in all the magazines. In your Dolce & Gabbana, you are bursting at the seams. You're the center of the world and you're Mr. Hip Flip scene. But I prefer the icon 'cause I met the real thing of Mr. Hip Flip.
Och jag förnfrepar sig varenda fire och nicht ist heiß und der Rebelle mit seiner Kinderle lernt alle weiß und der Rebelle mit seiner Kinderle lernt alle weiß.
Registration's already underway for Tacoma Park Recreation Department Summer Camp. Find a great camp for your teen, tot, or youth.
They get into basically like youth kids every day.
Visit us online for a full listing.
And every man neath this vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And every woman neath her vine and fig tree shall live in peace and unafraid. And into plowshares beat their swords, nation shall make war no more. And into one shall make war no more. Oh, no more. Lo يسقي الكوي خرب لو يمردود ملخمة لو يسقي الكوي خرب لو يمردود
Council will stand in session. Roll call, please.
A member of my family was killed with a gun. It can happen, and it does, and it was an
For you
accident.
to vote against these fares and cutting services.
Aye passes 5-2.
A lot can happen in a day. We'll make sure you don't miss a thing.